Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was raised in a loving and prosperous Canadian family with 3 brothers. His parents, Bill and Susan, set a positive example and taught their children valuable life lessons. Bill worked at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and had diverse interests, while Susan managed the household and cared for her family without outside help. The whole family admired Susan, who showed equal love to all her sons. Although Brett seemed to get in trouble less often, it was because he had a talent for talking his way out of difficult situations. He was charismatic and well-liked by his peers. Brett's charm earned him many friends in school, and he went on to attend university after high school. However, he felt pressure to outdo his brothers, so he started a house painting business in the local newspaper. Initially, he did well and made his mother proud, but eventually he realized that it wasn't as fulfilling as he thought and had to drop out of university to focus on it. As his brothers graduated and found jobs, Brett stayed behind with his parents and younger brother, accumulating debt and struggling with depression. By 2007, his debt had reached $60,000, and he struggled to manage his finances, hiding his troubles behind volunteer work and kindness. Desperate and broke, Brett decided to rob a bank on October 28, 2007. He disguised himself with old clothes, a hat, and a scarf that covered his face, and limped into the bank on the outskirts of his neighborhood. After threatening a bank employee, he left with just over $1,000, realizing he would need to rob many more banks to settle his debts. After his first robbery, he was worried that the police would catch up with him, so he avoided going home for a few days. He told his mother he had a job in a nearby town and spent his nights sleeping in his car, periodically sneaking back to his house to check if the police were watching. Fortunately, everything seemed quiet, and no one was looking for him, which made him feel like he was doing things right. As he continued to rob banks, Brett changed his appearance each time. He stopped wearing his old clothes and instead bought second-hand ones or found them in the trash. After each heist, he would burn the clothes he wore. He also bought a fake beard from a costume store to disguise himself. The bank employees he threatened always remembered the bearded man, which helped to create a false identity. The Toronto newspapers wrote about the bearded robber, but Brett never made a large sum of money from his crimes. The most he stole was $3,000. Eventually, his luck ran out, and the police spotted his car on surveillance cameras, following him all the way home. By then, they still didn't have concrete evidence to prove his guilt, so they decided to keep an eye on the suspect. For 15 days, Brett didn't commit any robberies, which was unusual since he typically struck every 3 or 4 days. The police were starting to think they had the wrong guy and were wasting their time. However, their luck changed when Brett left his house, got into a car, and later got out near a bank wearing a disguise. He entered the bank, stayed for a bit, and when he tried to exit, the police were waiting to arrest him. After months of searching, they finally caught the notorious bearded robber. Brett was investigated for 7 months and charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a permit to carry a gun, Brett never brought a weapon with him during his robberies, not even a kitchen knife. Brett was arrested and faced 19 charges, leading to a prison sentence. He, along with his family, filed multiple appeals, which resulted in 11 charges being dropped. Once eligible, Brett applied for parole and submitted a petition. In it, he explained that he had committed the crimes while struggling with severe depression, resulting from 2 failed relationships and significant debt. Brett emphasized that he had not used weapons and had no intention of harming anyone during the crimes. The parole board accepted his remarks, but required him to undergo a psychological evaluation. This had a positive impact on Brett, and he took the opportunity to reconnect with his family, with whom he had not communicated while incarcerated. The parole board noticed the positive changes in Brett and granted him early release on November 24, 2010. However, his newfound freedom was bittersweet and even more challenging than before. Before his imprisonment, Brett was a painter carrying emotional burdens. After his release, he was a bank robber and ex-convict with a tarnished reputation. After the robbery incident, Brett struggled to find a job due to his notorious reputation. Even people who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they recognized him as the bearded robber. To make matters worse, their neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and frequently visited, began spreading unpleasant rumors about the family. As a result, the Ryan family decided to sell their house and move to Scarborough. In their new location, Susan started a new garden and Brett managed to find a job at a trading company, although his salary was not high. Fortunately, his parents were able to support him financially as he worked to rebuild his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist who consistently advised him to maintain a close relationship with his family. This advice proved to be valuable. Despite this, Brett's financial situation remained a challenge. However, his life took a positive turn in September 2011 when he met Kristen Baxter, a wonderful young woman who owned an apartment with a beautiful sea view. She maintained a healthy lifestyle through sports and didn't concern herself with Brett's past. The couple enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son happy and believed Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential and become a responsible member of society. Brett's life was improving, but an unexpected event occurred that threatened to derail his progress. His father's sudden passing was a devastating blow, and Brett's depression began to resurface. To cope, he increased his visits to a psychologist and devoted more time to supporting his mother financially, although his own funds were limited. As their long-term relationship evolved, Brett knew it was time to take a significant step. No longer just careless teenagers, the young couple needed to build a life together. Deeply in love with Kristen, Brett decided to make a heartfelt proposal. He had saved up some money and discussed his plans with his mother, wanting to make the proposal unforgettable and impossible for Kristen to refuse. Susan understood what her son Brett was hinting at, so she gave him money to buy an engagement ring for his girlfriend, Kristen. Previously, the couple had discussed their future together, and Kristen didn't need an extravagant gift to prove Brett's commitment. However, Brett wanted to make a grand gesture and purchased a gold ring with a large diamond for her. Needless to say, Kristen accepted his proposal. Once engaged, the couple began making wedding plans. Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was shocked by how expensive everything was and how it made him worried about his job security. This motivated him to find a well-paying job to support their future together. He discovered an engineering job opening at a large tech company, created a resume, and applied for the position. After a successful interview, he got the job, which thrilled him. Brett excitedly shared the news with Kristen and his mother, and he even asked his mother for money to buy a fancy suit for his new job. Brett's mother had agreed to buy him a suit for a job interview. However, just after the purchase, the company called to inform him that his application was rejected due to his criminal past, which the security service had discovered. Brett was devastated by the news and felt like giving up. He questioned the point of continuing with the interview process if no one wanted to hire an ex-criminal, regardless of his attempts to reform. Disheartened, Brett decided to abandon his university studies and instead use the money his mother and brothers had given him to finance his wedding to Kristen. He didn't inform his family or counselor about his decision to drop out of university, nor did he share the news about being rejected for the engineering job. Brett created a false image of himself as a successful businessman. He'd dress up in a suit and tie, then change into painting clothes on his way to work. He lied to his relatives, telling them he worked in an office, and supported this fiction by posting photos on social media that he downloaded from the internet. When he was with his family, Brett would often pretend to receive important work calls, making excuses to take care of urgent business matters. He was skilled at deceiving those around him, and no one suspected that he was actually just a house painter. In September 2016, Brett's 5-year relationship with Kristen was nearing its climax as they planned their wedding. He even agreed to rent an expensive restaurant that would cost $100 per guest. The Ryan family was overjoyed, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around, with a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and a beautiful fiancée. Brett's lies had spiraled out of control, and there was no escape from the consequences. With the wedding only a month away, he had invested heavily in the event. To foot the bill, he repeatedly borrowed money from his mother, and when she could no longer help, he shamelessly demanded that she get a better-paying job. Around the same time, he planned an extravagant bachelor party in August, inviting all his friends and brothers. As his web of lies began to unravel, Brett confided in his counselor about the situation. For a year, he had deceived his family into believing he worked as an engineer for a technology company. The psychologist was dismayed that his longtime client had gone astray again and advised Brett to confess everything to his mother. After much contemplation and procrastination, Brett finally came clean to her. His mother was outraged, having proudly told everyone about her supposed wonderful son. She insisted that Brett reveal the truth to Kristen, threatening to expose him herself if he didn't comply. Moreover, she warned him that his brothers were already aware of the situation and sided with her. Brett couldn't muster the courage to confess to Kristen, having struggled to tell the truth to his mother in the first place. Brett knew the wedding was only a month away, but he remained silent about his lies, even though it would be better for Kristen to know the truth beforehand. He was unsure what he was hoping to achieve by keeping quiet, but he couldn't shake the thought that his mother might expose him to Kristen, causing a scandal. Every time Kristen's phone rang, Brett's heart skipped a beat, fearing it was his mother calling to reveal his secrets. He breathed a sigh of relief when it was just a friend inquiring about the wedding plans. Desperate to stop his mother from interfering, Brett hatched a sinister plan. Because he was not allowed to use firearms due to his previous robbery conviction, he decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon. Brett had learned how to shoot a crossbow from his late father, who used to practice target shooting in their garden. Though his father had taught him well, he never intended for Brett to use this skill for harm. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows from a sporting goods store and hid them away, preparing to carry out his disturbing plan. Brett created an alibi to deceive others into thinking he was at home all day. He rigged a fan to turn on at a set time, which then moved a spoon across his computer keyboard, automatically posting pre-written comments on YouTube videos. On August 25th, Brett dressed in disguise to conceal his identity and left his house through the back door to avoid detection by security cameras. He took a train to his parents' house, intent on taking care of anyone who might threaten his and Kristen's well-being. When Brett arrived unexpectedly at his parents' house, his mother Susan was taken aback. Despite her poor health that day, Brett persisted in trying to convince her not to tell Kristen anything, eventually becoming angry and aggressive. Susan sensed something was wrong and, intimidated by her son's intense behavior, warned him that she had already called Christopher and he was on his way to their location. Brett's anger and adrenaline surged out of control as he ran to the garage to grab a crossbow. However, his emotional state prevented him from making a clear shot, so he instead used the butt of the gun to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he placed plastic bags over her body and tightened a rope around her neck. Brett then loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother Christopher to arrive. When Christopher called out for their mother or brother, Brett shot him in the neck from behind, causing his death within minutes. Susan, their mother, had also called their youngest brother Alexander, who was also shot in the neck, but the arrow didn't go deep enough, and he began screaming for help. Throughout the chaos, Leland was oblivious to the violence unfolding in the garage and garden, unaware that his own brother was committing the crimes. He slept in his second-floor room until a scream disturbed him. Rushing downstairs, Leland found Brett trying to strangle Alexander, and a fierce fight broke out between the two brothers. Once Leland gained the upper hand, he pushed Brett aside and ran to the neighbors to call the police. Brett realized he was trapped in the house with no escape, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. He acknowledged that he had ruined his life and there was no turning back. He took out his phone and wrote a letter to Kristen, begging for her forgiveness. When the police arrived, they found Brett sitting next to his brother Alexander, both of them covered in blood. Despite his injuries, Alexander was still alive, but later succumbed to his wounds in the hospital. Brett voluntarily handed himself over to the police, asking to be handcuffed and taken to the station. There, he confessed to the crimes and revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden under packages in the garage. He expressed regret, stating that he had never intended to kill Susan, only to scare her. However, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, using them as witnesses to his twisted scheme. If they hadn't arrived that day, they would still be alive, just like they had been nearly 10 years prior. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his depression, but it didn't lessen his punishment. Despite confessing to the crimes without resistance and cooperating with the investigation, he received 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. He will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the tragedy, has declined to speak to the press, but he is well known in Toronto for his... Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Stacy Smith. Stacy Ann Smith was born on September 21, 1977. She was known for her beauty and outgoing personality, which made her a popular cheerleader in high school. After graduation, she met the love of her life, Stephen, and they started a family. Their daughter, Mackenzie, was born in June 2002, followed by a son, Landon, 4 years later. Stacy and Stephen eventually got married and thought their happiness would last. However, their relationship took a turn for the worse, and they eventually broke up. In 2009, she reconnected with an old high school acquaintance, Brent. Brent had secretly harbored feelings for Stacy back in high school, but she didn't reciprocate at the time. This time, their connection evolved into a romantic relationship. Stacy had divorced her ex-husband Stephen by this point, and Brent was aware that she had moved on. As she started rebuilding her personal life, Stacy's friendship with Brent blossomed into something more, offering her a new lease on love. Stacy frequently saw Brent picked up the kids for the weekend. Brent got along well with Stacy's children, which made her happy. However, their relationship eventually hit a rough patch. They argued frequently, often due to Brent's jealousy, as he tried to exert control over certain aspects of her life. When Stacy was on the phone, Brent would demand to know who she was talking to. This led to them breaking up several times. On Christmas Eve 2009, Stacy moved into a new home with her children, her cousin Timothy, and Brent. They spent the evening decorating the house for Christmas and creating a warm atmosphere. A few days later, on December 28, 2009, Stacy's father, John Paul, tried to reach his daughter by phone, but she didn't answer. As several hours passed with no response or return call from Stacy, John grew concerned and decided to check on her. He drove to the house where Stacy lived with her children to see what was wrong. John arrived at the house and found nothing out of the ordinary at first. He knocked on the front door and called out to his daughter, Stacy, but there was no response. The door was locked, so he looked through the window and spotted his 3-year-old grandson, Landon. When Landon came closer, John asked where his mom was, and Landon said she was sleeping. However, John knew something was wrong because Stacy was a light sleeper and would have woken up to the knocks on the door. John asked Landon to let him in and guided him through opening the door. Once inside, John asked Landon to wait in a living room while he went to check on Stacy. Upon entering the kitchen, John found Stacy's body lying on the floor, and he realized she was dead. He discovered bloodstains in the kitchen and Stacy's bedroom. It was clear that Stacy's death was no accident. She had a fatal stab wound to her neck. The police were immediately called, and the house was searched. As detectives investigated the scene, they found a message scrawled on one of the walls that quickly grabbed their attention. Message at the crime scene accused Stacy of being unfaithful. The message consisted of only 2 words, cheating, and a second word that started with the letter W. The fact that Landon was left alone for most of the day while his mother was dead was particularly disturbing. Forensic analysis revealed the boy's bloody footprints next to Stacy's body. The police collected all potential evidence from the house, including cigarette butts and beer cans, which could be used to obtain DNA samples. However, the writing on the wall was of greatest interest to the investigators. Identifying the person who wrote it was crucial. Based on the evidence, it was reasonable to assume that the motive behind the crime was jealousy, cruelty, and a desire for revenge. The killer may have been someone Stacy knew and trusted, as there were no signs of forced entry into her home. This suggests that she may have let the perpetrator in voluntarily. The investigation found that Stacy's car and keys were missing, and her phone and the murder weapon were not found at the scene. The police alerted all patrol units to be on the lookout for Stacy's car, as the killer may have used it to flee the scene. Psychologists spoke with Landon, Stacy's son, to see if he had witnessed anything unusual or seen the person who hurt his mother. However, Landon was unable to provide any helpful information to the police. When he woke up, he found his mother lying on the floor and initially thought she was asleep. He tried to wake her up, but she was unresponsive. At the beginning of the investigation, 2 individuals identified as potential suspects, Stacy's boyfriend, Brent, and her ex-husband, Steven. It was possible that Steven still harbored feelings for Stacy and was resentful that she had moved on to someone else after their divorce. Brent, on the other hand, was known to be jealous, and this was common knowledge among those who knew him. While patrol officers searched for Stacy's car, investigators spoke with her family members. Following this conversation, Brent became the primary suspect. Brent's family and friends were aware of his intense jealousy and short temper, which often led to emotional outbursts when he suspected Stacy was in contact with someone else. His volatile nature was a major concern, and Stacy had even cut off communication with him several times in the past. Given his history, the detectives wanted to know if he had any involvement and establish his whereabouts at the time of Stacy's death. With a search warrant in hand, the investigators arrived at the house, finding Brent in his garage. The investigators informed Brent about the search warrant and explained that their visit was part of the investigation into Stacy Smith's death. Brent was stunned by the news of Stacy's death, but was his apparent grief just an act? Investigators took him to the police station for questioning to find out. During the interrogation, Brent's statements only fueled the police's suspicions. He revealed that his relationship with Stacy was troubled and they frequently argued. In fact, their last quarrel occurred the day before her death. Brent claimed that Stacy had an affair with one of his friends, a betrayal that had left their relationship reeling. Brent told the investigators that on December 27th, he went home after their fight, calmed down, and then returned to Stacy's house a few hours later. They had a quiet conversation in her bedroom, where intimacy was rekindled. He left around 2 a.m. Landon and her cousin Timothy were sleeping in the house and didn't notice anything unusual. Brent insisted that everything was fine between him and Stacy when he left, and he was unaware of her death until the police told him. However, no one could confirm Brent's alibi, leaving the investigators to doubt his story. The police requested that Brent take a polygraph test to gauge his responses to their questions. Initially hesitant, Brent agreed to the test in order to clear his name and avoid being perceived as a suspect. He successfully passed the polygraph test without any issues. Following the test, the police considered removing him from their list of suspects. During the polygraph test, officers observed a small red spot on Brent's shirt that resembled dried blood. Brent explained that he had sustained a minor injury the day before and claimed the spot was his own blood. To verify Brent's account, detectives decided to interview Stacy's cousin, Timothy, as he was the last person known to have seen Stacy alive. However, Timothy's whereabouts were unknown. Despite the family gathering after Stacy's death, Timothy had vanished, and his phone calls went unanswered. The family and police were worried, speculating that Timothy might have been kidnapped. Given his past struggles with substance abuse, it was possible that he owed money to someone who sought revenge. Stephen, Stacy's ex-husband, was an initial suspect in the crime. A possible motive was his anger towards Stacy for being in a relationship with Brent before their divorce was finalized. Although they no longer lived together, Stephen may have felt offended by Stacy's actions. This anger could have led him to commit the crime and leave a derogatory message at the scene. Another potential motive was Stephen's desire to have full custody of their children. As it stood, he only saw them on weekends. However, when questioned by police, Stephen remained calm and cooperative. He denied any involvement in Stacy's death, stating he would never harm Stacy. Stephen claimed that he and Stacy had maintained a cordial relationship after their divorce. He shared the same suspicions as Stacy's family, believing Brent was responsible for the crime. Stephen also mentioned that Stacy and Brent's relationship was unstable. He provided an alibi for the night of the crime, which was later confirmed by police, leading to his exclusion from the list of suspects. While searching for Stacy's car, investigators discovered a surprising twist. The vehicle they found belonged to Dr. William Casto, Stacy's boss. This revelation led to the discovery of a romantic relationship between Stacy and Dr. Casto. Colleagues reported that they were extremely close, and at one point, Dr. Casto had given Stacy a car. This new information made Dr. Casto a potential suspect in the investigation. The police considered the possibility that Dr. Casto might have found out about Stacy's relationship with Brent and reacted violently. To explore this lead, the detective began looking for Dr. Casto. However, Dr. Casto did not attempt to hide and continued with his daily routine. Upon learning of Stacy's death and the police's desire to speak with him, Dr. Casto voluntarily went to the police station. During the interrogation, Dr. Casto openly acknowledged his intimate relationship with Stacy and confirmed that he had given her the car. According to him, he and Stacy were in a long-term consensual relationship. He provided for her and was there to support her through problems. Despite their relationship, he vehemently denied any involvement in her murder, claiming he had no motive to harm her. He cooperated fully with the investigation, providing an alibi for the night of her death. The alibi checked out, and investigators were able to rule him out as a suspect. Through the use of GPS tracking technology, the location of Stacy's car was finally identified in an abandoned parking lot roughly 5 miles from her residence. Authorities rushed to the scene, transported the car to their forensics garage for inspection. While police did find Stacy's credit cards and other belongings in the car, no physical evidence was recovered from the vehicle that suggested the presence of a weapon. Additionally, police investigating the disappearance made another discovery by digging deeper into Timothy's past. Timothy had a history of run-ins with the law and was hiding a dark past. He had previously been convicted of a sex crime and theft. The allegations stated that he had molested a minor, but Timothy claimed that that girl had lied about her age, leading him to believe she was of legal age. As a result of his conviction, Timothy served time in prison and was required to register as a sex offender. However, he failed to comply with this requirement. 2 days after Stacy's murder, Timothy contacted the police, claiming he was staying at a local motel and had no involvement in her death. A warrant was issued for Timothy's arrest. When police arrived at the motel, they found that Timothy had escaped, but they did find a woman he was in a relationship with. She informed the police that Timothy was hiding in an abandoned house on the other side of the city. On December 30th, 2009, Timothy was arrested and questioned by police about the events surrounding Stacy's death. When asked to corroborate Brent's alibi, Timothy confirmed that he had been at the house with Stacy and her son. However, Timothy then unexpectedly accused Brent of taking Stacy's life. According to Timothy, Brent was not a good person and was constantly fighting with Stacy. He even claimed to have witnessed an argument between them on the day of the incident. Timothy stated that he couldn't understand why Stacy was in a relationship with Brent, whom he believed did not love or respect her. When asked why he left the crime scene and hid, Timothy admitted that he was afraid of being arrested because he had not registered as a sex offender. However, Timothy's accusations against Brent lost credibility after the police received lab results showing that a drop of dried blood on Brent's shirt was actually his own, not Stacy's. With no evidence linking Brent to the crime, the focus of the investigation narrowed. Brent maintained that he had left the house, leaving only Stacy, Timothy, and Landon behind. 3-year-old Landon was clearly not capable of committing the crime and leaving a disturbing message on the wall. This led investigators to suspect that Timothy was hiding something. They noticed dried blood stains on Timothy's jeans and sent his clothes to the lab for further analysis. Timothy initially maintained that Brent was responsible for Stacy's death, but the investigators continued to question him. Eventually, he cracked under the pressure and revealed the truth. He explained that he had witnessed Stacy and Brent arguing on the night of her death, and Stacy had forgiven Brent as she always did. Timothy was angry with Stacy for forgiving Brent again. Later, after Brent had left, Timothy went to Stacy's bedroom to confront her. What transpired next is documented in court records without graphic details. On December 28, 2009, an argument broke out between Timothy and his cousin Stacy Smith at her home in St. Albans, West Virginia. The dispute began when Timothy made a comment about Stacy's boyfriend not treating her well. In response, Stacy called Timothy a junkie, which enraged him. He stormed out of the bedroom, went to the kitchen, and smoked a cigarette. A few minutes later, he returned to the bedroom, armed with a butcher knife. In a fatal attack, Timothy stabbed Stacy once in the right side of her neck as she lay in bed. Before fleeing the scene of the murder, Mr. Sutherland took Miss Smith's cell phone, credit card, money, and car keys. He also wrote the words, "cheating, expletive," on a living room wall in the house. Timothy told investigators that after he injured Stacy, she was able to get out of bed and walk a few more steps. Her son was sleeping in another room, and her daughter was spending the night with friends. While Timothy was telling all this to the detectives, he was crying, and it seemed he was sincerely remorseful. He also told them where he had put the weapon of the crime. He threw the knife that he used to take Stacy's life out the car window, not far from Stacy's house. Later, the police found this knife in the place Timothy specified. Laboratory analysis showed that there was Stacy's blood on his jeans. All this was enough to bring charges. When asked why he wrote these words on the wall, he replied that he wanted Stacy's boyfriend to become a suspect in the crime. Everyone knew Stacy and Brent often quarreled, and he wanted everyone to think that Brent had taken her life out of jealousy. But Brent believed that wasn't the only reason. Brent thought Timothy was in love with his cousin and was jealous of her. That night, he sat in an armchair in the living room and heard everything Brent and Stacy were doing in the bedroom. Perhaps jealousy made him lose his temper and do something. No one can fix this. The police considered the possibility that Timothy could have unsuccessfully tried to persuade Stacy into intimacy after Brent left the house. Yet, they found no evidence to confirm this. Only 2 people knew what happened that night, and one of them was dead. Although Timothy Sutherland fully admitted his guilt during interrogation, he declared his innocence at the first court hearing in 2010. But the authorities had enough evidence to convict him. The only question was who the jury would believe, the prosecutor, who claimed that the crime was premeditated, or the lawyer, who said that his client committed the crime in a state of passion. However, the fact that Timothy left her bedroom after an argument with Stacy, went to the kitchen, smoked a cigarette there, and then took a knife and returned indicated that he was aware of what he was doing. On March 18, 2011, Timothy Ray Sutherland was found guilty. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2013, he attempted to appeal the verdict but failed. Our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicholas Billingham. Fiona Beale was a kind and friendly woman who was devoted to her job and adored by her students. She lived with her partner, 42-year-old Nicholas Billingham, in Northampton, a large town in England. Fiona and Nicholas had been together for 17 years and, like many couples, they experienced their share of highs and lows. Leslie, a friend of them, described them as content. Leslie recalled that she had thought Fiona was really nice. Leslie mentioned that they hadn't displayed overt affection but seemed happy. Nicholas's history with women suggested that his relationships were often short-lived. His relationship with Fiona ended abruptly in November 2021, but it wasn't due to the usual reasons. The breakup occurred after they were required to isolate themselves for 10 days. After the breakup, Nicholas maintained contact with his friends and family, revealing to his mother that he had left with a woman named Faye and was happy with his new life. Meanwhile, Fiona completed her 10-day isolation period, recovered, and eventually returned to work. She received supportive messages from her colleagues when she returned to work. However, the split had a lasting impact on her. By the end of February 2022, nearly 4 months after the breakup, her mental health began to decline significantly. The memories of Nicholas in her Northampton home became overwhelming, so she decided to move to Cumbria, a 200-mile distance from her previous home. On March 15, 2022, her family grew concerned after reading her text messages. Their worry prompted them to contact the police. The police found Fiona severely injured in a bath at her Lake District Lodge rental. Officer Josh Parkin testified in court that when he arrived, ominous music was playing from her phone, and he initially thought she was dead. Parkin described the scene, stating that he had found a completely naked female lying in the bath. Music was playing from a mobile phone next to her. He immediately called for an ambulance and suggested they try to get her out of the bath to administer CPR. She then became partially conscious. To check her responsiveness, he had pulled her ear firmly, and she had moaned, trying to turn over. They had sat her up, and she had become emotional. Parkin had discovered a blue leather-bound notebook with a logo on the front. A quick glance had revealed it was a personal document detailing her mental health struggles at the time. Fiona's notebook revealed a dark history of abuse and a sinister plot. She wrote about her husband Nicholas's cruel behavior, including spitting on her and threatening her during intimate contact. She started planning her revenge as Tulip 22, a reckless and ruthless alter ego. Fiona described how she planned and executed the murder, using a knife and an eye mask to carry out the crime. She hid the body in the bathroom and later moved it to the garden, where it was buried under multiple layers of materials. The police initially dismissed Fiona's notebook as ramblings, but upon re-examining it, they found disturbing details that led them to investigate further. They searched Fiona's house and found a blood-stained mattress in the cellar. On March 19th, forensic officers and a cadaver dog discovered Nicholas's remains in the garden, wrapped in carpet and buried under various materials. Fiona's notebook revealed her regret and apology for the crime, but also her anger and hurt towards her husband. The body was found with a sleep mask covering the eyes, bearing the phrase, "This is my morning after" face on the inside. The police spokesman described the scene as showing utter contempt, as the body was wrapped in cables, hose pipes, and plastic bags mixed with debris from a building. An autopsy was conducted the day after the discovery. The results confirmed that the cause of death was a single stab wound to the right side of the neck, damaging the right jugular vein, esophagus, and trachea. The injury was inflicted with moderate force. Following the investigation, police arrested Fiona Beale on March 22, 2022, charging her with the murder of Nicholas Billingham. Nicholas's family was shocked and heartbroken when they learned of his death, particularly after discovering that Fiona had sent texts to them and Nicholas's friends from his own phone. Following the police investigation into Nicholas' death on November 1, 2021, it was discovered that Fiona attempted to cover her tracks in the days that followed. As part of her plan, Fiona claimed to infection, which would have given her a 10-day period of isolation, during which she would not be disturbed. Fiona's actions during this 10-day period were inconsistent with the severe symptoms she claimed to be experiencing due to the infection. On November 2nd, with Fiona using Nicholas's Amazon account, and later her own, to purchase various cleaning supplies, including products for Venetian blinds, a new mop and bucket, heavy-duty trash bags, a new mattress, bedding, clothing, wall art, and mirrors. Later that day, Fiona made changes to her order, adding 3 rolls of duct tape to a delivery that already included multiple cleaning products. She also made a separate purchase at 2:19 p.m., buying heavy-duty gardening gloves, a stainless steel digging spade, and a garden incinerator. These items would later be used to dispose of a body. Nearly 2 weeks after Nicholas's death, Fiona went shopping again. On November 13th, supermarket cameras caught her buying various items, including building materials that she would later use to construct a grave. The police released the CCTV footage of this shopping trip. Fiona also impersonated Nicholas by sending texts to his family and friends for several months. She even invited Nicholas's mother to visit her at home. Nicholas's mother, Miss Valentine, reported that Fiona had invited her over for a Christmas drink on December 23, 2021. Unbeknownst to Miss Valentine, her son's body was buried in Fiona's back garden at the time. Fiona Beale appeared to be living a normal life, showing no signs of depression or trauma after the incident. During the trial, Fiona initially denied any wrongdoing but later admitted to taking Nicholas's life, claiming it was an involuntary act. However, the prosecutor disagreed with her account. He presented evidence that Nicholas had been unfaithful to Fiona throughout their 17-year relationship, cheating on her with multiple women. Despite Nicholas's infidelity, Fiona had taken him back on multiple occasions. The prosecutor revealed that one of Nicholas's affairs had resulted in a child. Instead of leaving Nicholas, Fiona allegedly planned and executed murder, carefully considering how to kill him, dispose of his body, and cover her tracks. She also prepared explanations for his disappearance and her own absence from work on the day of the crime. Defense attorney Andrew Wheeler addressed the jury after the prosecution's opening argument, stating that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years due to Nicholas Billingham's controlling behavior. He emphasized that Fiona, a 49-year-old woman with a good reputation, was a hardworking and well-liked school teacher who had been in a 17-year partnership with the victim. Wheeler asked the jury to consider how someone with Fiona's good character could commit such a crime. Wheeler stressed that the key issue in the case was her state of mind at the time of the killing. Wheeler explained that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years and suggested that Nicholas Billingham's psychologically dominating behavior had gradually worn her down. Fiona Beale admitted her wrongdoing. She then shared details about her personal life and relationship with Nicholas at Northampton Crown Court. Fiona revealed that she had been prescribed antidepressants during her university years. She described Nicholas as caring and attentive at the start of their relationship, but claimed he gradually changed over time. Fiona alleged that Billingham's behavior became increasingly controlling, particularly when it came to cleaning. She recalled an incident where she had left a cloth with cleaner on it, which stained a worktop. Although it seemed minor at first, cleaning became a major issue throughout their relationship. Instead of laughing off mistakes, Fiona said she would get scolded by Billingham. She also described how meal times became rigid and inflexible, with everything having to be exactly as Nicholas wanted it. Over time, this behavior escalated and continued until the end of their relationship. Even small things, like the way items were placed in cupboards, became a point of contention, with Nicholas insisting that they face outwards. Fiona testified that Nicholas's behavior escalated from joking insults to cruel comments, which made her lose confidence. She also shared that before taking Nicholas's life, she warned him that she would kill him if he ever treated another woman the way he treated her. The judge stated that considering the severity of the crime, he sentenced Fiona to a minimum of 20 years in prison. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Augustina M. Winkelried. Augustina M. Winkelried was born on June 6, 2001, in Esperanza, where she grew up in a big. As the baby of the family, she naturally received extra attention and affection. People who knew her described her as outgoing, kind-hearted, and always wearing a bright smile. On January 12, 2019, Augustina's father drove her to a friend's house, where a group of about 6 friends were meeting up. They planned to go to Teo's, a nightclub with a bowling alley, later that night. Augustina had already made plans to sleep over at her friend's house, and her father knew about these plans. Augustina left a club in the afternoon and went home. Later that night, she asked her boyfriend Noel to join her at the club, but he declined, saying he was tired. Augustina and her friends had a great time at the club, dancing and enjoying the music until 5 a.m., when they decided to leave. However, she ran into another group of friends and decided to stay longer. At 5:40 a.m., a surveillance camera showed Augustina leaving the club, carrying her phone. She then went to a nearby fast food stand, where she waited in line, got her order, and chatted briefly with someone she knew. After that, she headed towards the road. Since the friend's house where she was staying the night was close by, Augustina decided to walk. It was getting light, and she didn't seem concerned about her safety. There were no sidewalks, so she walked along the side of the road. Augustina's whereabouts on the night in question are unclear, but video footage shows she walked steadily despite wearing high-heeled platform shoes. The only moment of instability was when she approached the driveway, which is understandable given that it's an unpaved road with rocks. However, Augustina failed to arrive at her friend's house or her own home, which was unusual because she always kept her parents informed of her location. But on this occasion, when morning came, her parents didn't receive a text from her saying she had arrived safely. Concerned, Augustina's father, Daniel Winkelried, contacted the police and began searching for his daughter on his own. After starting their investigation, police officers went to Teo's club to interview potential witnesses and review the available surveillance footage, since they knew Augustina had spent the entire night there. Meanwhile, a friend of Augustina's, Brian, reached out to her father, Daniel, and told him that he had seen Augustina outside Teo's club around 6 a.m. Brian was driving by when he noticed Augustina standing on the side of the road, talking to the driver of a silver car that had pulled over next to her. Brian continued driving down the road, but quickly pulled out his phone and called Augustina to check on her. He asked if she was all right and if she needed a ride home. Augustina replied that she was fine. Augustina accepted Brian's offer for a ride, saying she was headed to a friend's house. Brian decided to wait for her at a nearby gas station, which was just a few hundred meters away from where he first spotted her. He would fill up his car while waiting. However, 15 minutes passed, and Augustina failed to appear at the gas station. Brian then went to look for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Despite trying to contact her, Brian was unsuccessful as Augustina did not answer her phone. At the time, Brian didn't think much of it, assuming that Augustina had simply gone straight to her friend's house and forgotten that he was waiting. The main clue in this situation was the silver car. Although Brian couldn't identify the exact brand and model, he described it as fairly old. The man in the driver's seat may have been the last person to see Augustina before she disappeared. Police didn't rule out the possibility that he was involved in her disappearance. They tracked her cell phone signal and found that the last recorded signal was from a tower near the Taos Club. The search team focused on the vacant lots and fields around the club, which is on the outskirts of town. A nearby gas station was the only business with surveillance cameras along the road Augustina was walking on. Daniel, Augustina's father, reviewed the footage to see if his daughter had passed by the gas station. Since her friend's house was nearby, it's likely that Augustina would have walked past the gas station. The attendant showed Daniel the footage after he explained the situation and asked for help. The camera had recorded footage from that morning, but the attendant almost lost his job as a result. Later, the gas station owner fired the employee for letting someone watch the security footage without permission. However, when the townspeople found out, they boycotted the gas station, which led the owner to rehire the employee and apologize. Daniel reviewed the gas station's footage and couldn't find his daughter on it. It seemed Augustina never made it there. But the footage did show an old silver car, the same one Brian had described earlier, passing by the gas station around the time Augustina was walking on the road. The car was a Renault, and Daniel identified its owner as Pablo Trianfini, a 39-year-old garbage collector who lived nearby. Pablo had no prior convictions but had been on the police's radar several times. The first incident occurred in 2017 when Trianfini's ex-wife reported him to the police for physical abuse, leading to a court order that banned him from approaching her. He was arrested again in the same year for violating this order. After reviewing the surveillance footage, the police identified the silver car. However, upon learning that Daniel had already seen the video, they worried that a violent attack might occur and rushed to Pablo Trianfini's residence. When they arrived, they found a crowd gathered outside, shouting, "Where is Augustina?" The crowd dispersed after the police arrived, and someone informed the officers that Trianfini was inside the house. Trianfini had peeked out, but upon seeing the hostile crowd, he retreated back inside and locked the door. The police did not have sufficient reason to forcibly enter the house, so they requested a search warrant. While waiting for the search warrant, the police cordoned off the house to prevent Trianfini from escaping. Around midnight, an officer checked the yard and discovered that Pablo Trianfini had died. The officer rushed to assist, but it was too late, and Trianfini was deceased. Such a turn of events made Pablo Trianfini's involvement in Augustina's disappearance clear. However, after searching his house and car, the police still found no evidence. Trianfini attempted to deflect further suspicion by using a rope, but its purpose was unclear. As the police searched Trianfini's house, his neighbor approached them. The neighbor stated that earlier that day, Pablo had borrowed a shovel, claiming he needed to dig for earthworms for a fishing trip. About 30 minutes later, Trianfini returned the shovel and made a comment that struck his neighbor as odd. He thanked the neighbor and said, "Thank you, I don't know if I'll ever see you again." Witnesses reported seeing Trianfini leave his house multiple times on Sunday, riding his bicycle while carrying a shovel. This behavior suggested that Augustina might no longer be alive. On Monday, January 14, 2019, a search operation began at dawn, aided by drones and police dogs. At 9:15 a.m., Augustina's partially clothed body was found approximately 500 meters away from Taos Club, hidden in a ditch with dense vegetation. The forensic investigation revealed that Augustina had fiercely defended herself, resulting in defensive wounds on her hands and her attacker's skin under her fingernails. DNA analysis confirmed that Pablo Trianfini was the perpetrator. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The circumstances surrounding Augustina's entry into Trianfini's car remain unclear. It is unknown whether she was coerced or accepted a ride voluntarily. With both parties now unable to share their accounts, the truth may never be fully known. A search of Trianfini's phone did not yield any evidence of prior communication or connection with. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley, born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to parents Cheryl and Hilton Lanier Beasley. After her parents' separation, Beasley moved to Dothan with her mother in 1984. She was deeply loved by her mother and stepfather, Joey Begun, whom her mother married a few years later. Beasley grew up in a comfortable home in Dothan, Alabama, with her 4 sisters. She developed into a sociable young woman with a wide range of interests, including cheerleading, dance, piano, and swimming. She also worked as a model, along with her sisters, for several agencies. Despite her many pursuits, she valued time spent with friends and family. In high school, Beasley befriended Tracy Hallett, a fellow cheerleader. They quickly became inseparable. Tracy Hallett was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett. Her father, a member of the Dothan Police Department, tragically passed away when Tracy was just 5 years old. Her mother, Carolyn, later remarried a man named Mike Roberts, who helped raise Tracy Hallett alongside her mother. Tracy Hallett was a shy but selfless person who always put others before herself. She was particularly protective of her 2 younger brothers and took her responsibilities as an older sister seriously. Like Beasley, Tracy Hallett attended Northview High School, earning good grades and participating as a cheerleader. As Beasley and Tracy Hallett were transitioning into adulthood, they were unaware of the tragic events that would soon shatter their hopes and dreams. On the evening of July 31, 1999, around 10:05 p.m., they friends left Dothan in J.B. Beasley's black 1993 Mazda 929, heading to a birthday party in Headland, just a few miles north. However, their unfamiliarity with the roads soon led them into difficulty. Beasley and Tracy Hallett started their trip but took a wrong turn shortly after leaving their hometown, becoming lost. At around 10:30 p.m., they stopped at a BP gas station in Headland, near the intersection of routes 173 and 431, to get directions. From the gas station's payphone, they called their friends to get clearer directions to their party destination. However, after continuing their trip, they found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, approximately 24 miles northwest of Headland, rather than their desired location. At 11:30 p.m., they realized they were still lost and pulled over at the Big Little store to get their bearings. Although the store was closed, Tracy Hallett used the payphone to call her mother, explaining that they had gotten lost and were now in Ozark. She updated her mother on their plans to return home rather than continue their search for the party. A woman named Marilyn Merrick and her daughters pulled into a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy Hallett and Beasley approached them, asking for directions to Dothan. Marilyn did her best to explain the route, and they seemed to grasp it. She noticed that they appeared to be well-mannered and were driving a clean and tidy car. As Marilyn watched, they followed her directions, pulling out of the parking lot and turning right. On August 1, 1999, Tracy Hallett's mother filed a missing person report with the police around 8 a.m. Investigators quickly began searching for Tracy Hallett and her friend, Beasley, who had not been seen since the previous night. Their first lead came when police discovered Beasley's car parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark. The vehicle showed signs of recent use, with an almost empty gas tank despite being filled the day before. The car was also dirty and had a partially rolled down driver's side window, yet the doors were locked with no signs of forced entry. Inside, police found Beasley's driver's license on the dashboard, along with 8 purses and cash, which suggested that the disappearance was not a result of a typical theft or robbery. The investigation into Shees initially focused on finding Beasley's car keys, as they were the only reported missing item. However, there was no sign of either Tracy Howlett or Beasley. A suspicious palm print on the locked trunk of Beasley's car heightened the police's concerns that something was terribly wrong. Although they suspected the trunk might hold important clues, they couldn't access it without the keys. It took 6 hours for the police to realize that the trunk could be opened from the inside using a latch, eliminating the need for the car key or a locksmith. Upon opening the trunk, the officers made a disturbing discovery. The lifeless bodies of the girls were found inside. Both victims were fully dressed, but their pants were soiled below the waist. Each girl had a single gunshot wound to the head, with Tracy Howlett shot in the temple and Beasley in the right cheek. Tracy Howlett had suffered injuries consistent with a violent struggle, including a 9mm shell casing lodged on her leg, scratches on her arm, and thornbriars tangled in her jeans. Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, investigators believed that they were likely killed while inside the trunk of the car, and that their deaths were not the result of a random attack, but rather an intentional act. As the families of the victims were notified of the tragic discovery, the authorities formally launched a homicide investigation. Initially, detectives considered robbery as a possible motive, but this theory was quickly dismissed when they found that the victims' personal belongings, including purses, jewelry, money, and credit cards, were still inside the car. Autopsies revealed that they had no alcohol or drugs in their system, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. This led investigators to rule out the possibility that the crime was motivated by sex. However, a subsequent report from the State Crime Lab, issued more than 2 months later, found traces of unknown semen on Tracy Howlett's clothing and skin. The palm print found on the trunk lid remained unidentified, with no matches in the database and no suspect to compare it to. As a result, authorities had limited leads to pursue. Despite the widespread attention the double murder of the teenagers received, investigators were no closer to identifying a suspect. A month after the discovery of Beasley and Tracy Howlett's bodies, a surprising breakthrough occurred. Johnny William Barentine, a 28-year-old Ozark resident, visited the Ozark Police Department on September 1st and shared a remarkable account. He claimed to have witnessed the double murder, stating that he had seen the incident on the same night as the crimes, around the time Tracy Howlett made a call from the Big Little Store's payphone. According to Barentine, he had been out buying milk for his 2-year-old son when he stumbled upon the horrific event. He returned home at 1 a.m., visibly upset, and told his wife that he had been in a collision with a black truck near Herring Road. After sharing this incident with friends in the days that followed Tracy Howlett and Beasley's murder, they encouraged him to report it to the police. They suggested that this information might be connected to the murders and could help the police solve the case, ultimately leading to the reward. During a 4-hour interview with Ozark Police, Barentine's account of the events surrounding the killings changed 6 times. Initially, he told police that on the night of the murders, he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the bodies were found. However, as the interview progressed, his story continued to evolve and change. Eventually, Barentine claimed that he had given a ride to a tattooed man he didn't know, and they drove past the Big Little Store together. He then testified that the man got into the car with 2 girls, whom he identified as Tracy Howlett and Beasley. According to Barentine, the man forced they out of the car on Herring Avenue. A confrontation took place between the man and Day as they tried to escape. After putting Day in the trunk, Barentine reported seeing something in the man's hands just before hearing 2 gunshots. The man then returned to the car, and Barentine drove him away from the scene before heading home. In a different account, Barentine confessed to investigators that he knew the man he had given a ride to and identified him as his neighbor. Notably, Barentine lived less than a mile from where the police found the victims' bodies. Johnny Barentine was named the prime suspect in the murders of Beasley and Tracy Hollett, but his story raised several red flags. He failed to mention any sexual activity that would explain the semen found on Beasley's clothing and body. Additionally, the neighbor he implicated had a solid alibi for the time of the crime. Barentine's appearance in his mugshot also seemed suspicious, as he looked startled and disheveled, as if he had just been awoken from a deep sleep. Despite these inconsistencies, police initially believed they had the right person. However, Barentine soon confessed that he had fabricated his entire story to collect the reward money. Surprisingly, at the preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent Charles Huggins testified that Barentine was able to accurately describe her clothing and other details consistent with the crime scene, which suggested that he may have had some knowledge of the events. After his arrest, Barentine was held in the Dale County Jail in Ozark without the possibility of bail. At a bond hearing on October 18th, Barentine claimed he was not involved in the killings. He told the judge that he had not picked up a tattooed man and had not witnessed anything on the night of the murders. According to Barentine, he had gone to the BP station around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his child and later fabricated a story to collect the reward money. The judge denied Barentine's request for bond, and he returned to jail. Despite the challenges, Barentine's family continued to support him. They gave interviews to the media, stating that he was innocent and incapable of harming anyone. Barentine's lawyer, Bill Kimmons, also maintained his client's innocence, stating that the prolonged interrogation had taken a toll on him, causing him to become entangled in his own web of deceit. During police questioning, Barentine was not informed that he was free to leave or use the bathroom at any time. His defense team highlighted that he had limited education, having only completed the 7th grade and part of the 8th grade, and was in special education classes, which suggested he lacked the capacity to plan a complex crime. He was eventually released from jail on December 17, 1999, when DNA evidence revealed that his DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. In January 2000, a grand jury in Dale County declined to indict Barentine, effectively clearing him as a suspect in the double murder. The investigation suffered a setback after Barentine's clearance, and the methods used by investigators were criticized. Questions arose about the Ozark Police Department's ability to handle the case. Despite this, the police still had several potential suspects under consideration. A Michigan man was considered a key suspect due to his proximity to the scene and suspicious behavior. He was in the area on the night of the murders and attended a party near where Beasley's car was found. Within days, he left town, raising suspicions. Investigators made 3 trips to Michigan to interview him, but he was unable to provide a solid alibi for hours on the night of the murder. Police were initially interested in 2 key leads, a person of interest whose DNA didn't match the crime scene, and a driver of a small white pickup truck captured on surveillance footage. The video showed the truck at the gas pumps at the same time the victims, Beasley and Tracy Hollett, were nearby at the payphone. However, no record of a gas purchase existed, and the video was of poor quality, making it impossible to clearly identify the driver or determine if anyone got out of the truck. The police released a photo of the truck a month later, asking for the public's help in identifying the driver. Unfortunately, no one came forward with any information, and the lead eventually disappeared. The investigation's last lead was a man from Mississippi who had been arrested in Jones County on an outstanding warrant for possessing drug paraphernalia. He had been visiting relatives in Ozark, but departed 2 days after the murders. Investigators wanted to question him, but ultimately, he provided no significant information. Due to lack of evidence, they were forced to release him. In March 2000, a woman came forward, claiming she heard screams and 2 gunshots near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits, on the night of the murders. She admitted she had been scared to report it earlier. Police searched the area based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same type used to kill they. However, the bullet's brand did not match the brand of the bullet shell casing found on Tracy's body. The unspent bullet found no useful markings for forensic comparison to other evidence, ruling out another potential lead in the case. Despite this and other dead ends over the years, investigators remained hopeful for a DNA match. As the families of Beasley and Tracy Howlett tried to move on with their lives, the case eventually went cold. Years later, new information rekindled the investigation. In 2015, a bombshell accusation shook the case. Rena, an auxiliary police officer with the Ozark Police Department, came forward and publicly accused a fellow officer of murdering Beasley and Tracy Howlett and implicated others in a cover-up. Rena made several disturbing allegations regarding the Ozark Police Department. She claimed that on July 31, 1999, a police officer stopped Beasley and demanded to know the location of cassette tapes containing incriminating conversations about the police department's involvement in cocaine trafficking. According to Rena, this confrontation led to the tragic murder of 2 innocent teenagers. Rena further alleged that she was threatened by multiple law enforcement officials who knew the identity of the murderer but helped cover up the crime by destroying evidence. Specifically, Rena accused 3 officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, of harassing and intimidating her. She also implicated the former police chief, Tony Spivey, who led the original investigation, in the cover-up. However, Rena declined to reveal the name of the officer she believed was directly responsible for the murders. American journalist John B. Carroll wrote that the officer likely assumed they girls planned to use the tapes as evidence in a court case set for August 2, 1999, just over a day after their murders. Carroll also reported that Rena was brutally beaten with a baseball bat after coming forward, which prevented her from revealing the actual killer. Law enforcement officials accused by Rena denied any involvement in the murders of Beasley and Tracy Howlett. Due to a lack of physical evidence, none of the officials were ever formally named as suspects in the case. Despite this, online allegations against them spread quickly on true crime websites and social media. As a result, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington from the Ozark, Alabama Police Department sued Rena Crum, John B. Carroll for defamation in 2016. The case was later dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of harassing Beasley's sister over several years and received a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Despite an extensive investigation that spanned 2 decades, including numerous interviews and DNA samples, authorities were unable to identify a suspect. It wasn't until 2019 that advances in DNA technology finally led to a breakthrough. In March 2019, investigators sent the DNA evidence found on Beasley's body in clothes to a specialized lab in Virginia called Parabon Nano. The lab used public genealogy databases to analyze the DNA and found a match, leading them to identify a suspect named Coley McCraney. McCraney, 45, was not previously a suspect in the 1999 murders of Beasley and Tracy Howlett, but DNA evidence now implicated him in the crime. McCraney was born in Alabama and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992. During his time in high school, he was an athlete and also served as the president of the library club. After graduation, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. In 1992, McCraney was married, but they separated 2 years later. They eventually divorced. His ex-wife filed a complaint with the Air Force in 1994, alleging that McCraney had assaulted her. McCraney later remarried in 2001 and had children with his second wife. In 1998, he was found to have failed to pay child support, but otherwise, he had no significant criminal record over the past 20 years. McCraney worked as a truck driver throughout his career, employed by several Alabama-based trucking companies over the years. More recently, he co-founded a church and worked as a bishop. At the time of the 1999 murders, Coley McCraney was 26 years old and living in Ozark, just 1 mile from where the bodies of Beasley and Tracy Hallett were found. Nearly 20 years later, on March 15, 2019, McCraney was arrested in Daleville, Alabama, following a traffic stop. During his subsequent interview with police, McCraney claimed to not know the victims. However, the investigators did not reveal any motive for the murders. The news of McCraney's arrest sent shockwaves through the Ozark community, including its police chief, Marlon Walker, who had attended school with McCraney. As the case seemed to be finally unraveling, a new development emerged. Rena Crum, a 53-year-old woman who had previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the murder, withdrew her allegations during an August 2022 hearing. McCraney, 49, is currently in Dale County Jail awaiting trial on 5 counts of capital murder for the shooting deaths of Beasley and Tracy Hallett. His bond was denied, and his trial is scheduled for April 17, 2023. The families of the victims expressed relief that the alleged killer has been apprehended, but they still face the difficult process of reliving painful memories during the trial. McCraney was ultimately found guilty of the murder and rape of Beasley and the murder of Hallett. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Corey Richins. Eric Richins was born on May 13, 1982, and his life had a profound impact on those around him. Eric was a sports enthusiast who actively participated in basketball, baseball, and soccer. He had a particular passion for outdoor activities, especially hunting. His love for the outdoors was evident in the numerous trophies he collected from around the world. Eric was a fun-loving person who lived in Utah and enjoyed exploring the outdoors with his many motorized vehicles. He was also deeply committed to his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With his family's support, Eric served a 2-year mission in Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After high school, Eric attended the University of Utah, graduating in 2009 with a degree in international studies and a minor in Spanish. It was during this time that he met Corey Richins, who worked at Home Depot. Eric, who often visited the store for work, developed a friendly relationship with Corey and was drawn to her charm and beauty. However, he was too nervous to approach her directly, so he asked a friend to help him get her contact information. While shopping at Home Depot, a friend of Eric's approached Corey and quietly asked for her phone number, saying that Eric wanted to get to know her better. Eric called Corey and they arranged to meet in person. Eric and Corey clicked immediately when they met. Their connection was real, and their first date marked the start of a wonderful romance. As they met each other's families, their relationship grew even stronger. Corey's family welcomed Eric with open arms, and Eric's family was just as impressed with Corey's kindness and how well she fit in with them. Eric's 2 older sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious of Corey, but they soon grew fond of and accepted Corey. In 2013, Eric and Corey tied the knot in a private ceremony, marking the beginning of their life together. They welcomed their first child, Carter, shortly after. The family continued to grow with the arrival of Ashton and then Weston, completing their happy family portrait. As a father, Eric found his footing quickly. His sons looked up to him and admired everything he did. Eric, in turn, took immense pride in his children's accomplishments, whether it was their academic achievements, sports victories, or creative pursuits. He was always present to support and celebrate their successes. Eric's entrepreneurial spirit led him to start a stonemasonry business, which flourished due to his exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. As a result, his business attracted many clients, providing financial security for Eric and his family. Curry was a successful real estate entrepreneur who contributed significantly to the family's income. Her expertise in the local market and business acumen made her a valuable partner in their growing family. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them at a profit. The Curry family appeared to have it all, with a lifestyle that seemed perfect on the surface. But beneath this facade, trouble was brewing. On March 4, 2020, the illusion of perfection shattered when Curry called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived at the scene, they found that Eric had already passed away. Curry was devastated by the news and immediately called her mother, Lisa, who rushed to her side. Curry's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, also joined them, and together they struggled to come to terms with the loss. Earlier that night, Curry had been celebrating a business success with Eric, marking the purchase of a mansion for her real estate company. Before bed, she had made Eric a Moscow Mule, a drink made with ginger beer and vodka. Curry had gone to bed around 9 p.m., but instead of sleeping in her own bed, she had lain down with her 9-year-old son in his room because he was having nightmares. Curry returned to her bedroom around 3 a.m. and found Eric unresponsive. When she touched Eric, she felt that her husband was extremely cold. Realizing that something was wrong, Curry waited for paramedics to arrive and followed the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric. Curry claimed to have followed the instructions given to her. However, the paramedics were unsure what caused Eric's death, and the lack of information led them to consider the possibility of an aneurysm, given that Eric was a 39-year-old man with no known medical conditions. Further investigation revealed that Eric had complained of chest pains to Curry the night before he died, which initially strengthened the suspicion of an aneurysm. The autopsy results were unexpected and came as a surprise to all parties involved in the case. It was discovered that Eric died from a fatal dose of fentanyl, a powerful painkiller that can be fatal if overdosed. From the moment Eric died, his family began to suspect that his recreational drug use may have contributed to the fentanyl in his system. Curry explained that Eric used a nightly THC gummy as a way to unwind after a long day. However, the family had concerns about where Eric was getting these gummies. They suspected that Eric wasn't always buying them from trustworthy sources, and that he might have been purchasing them on the street instead. Eric's mother-in-law, Lisa, was particularly worried because Eric had a history of recreational drug use and may have also bought pain pills from street vendors without knowing they might contain fentanyl, unknowingly putting his life at risk. Eric's family strongly rejected the allegations, convinced that something else was responsible and encouraging investigators to consider other possibilities. Meanwhile, Curry struggled to rebuild her life. According to her brother Ronnie, she faced numerous challenges, including the void left by her husband's absence. To manage her grief and comfort her children, Curry found a creative outlet. She self-published a children's book, Are You With Me?, on Amazon, aiming to help kids deal with the loss of a loved one. The book tells the story of a boy missing his deceased father through illustrations and storytelling, allowing Curry to channel her emotions into a positive project. Curry portrayed Eric as a constant, loving presence in her book, watching over their son. Her mother, Lisa, appreciated the book, saying it helped her family cope with their emotions and find some comfort. However, as detectives looked into Eric's death, they suspected foul play was involved. In a shocking twist, Curry was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023, just weeks after she had publicly shared her grief and promoted her book on local Utah news stations. The community was stunned by the news, struggling to understand the sudden turn of events. Curry, who initially gained public sympathy for her efforts to help children cope with loss, has become embroiled in a devastating scandal. According to court documents, Curry allegedly killed her husband Eric by administering a lethal dose of a poison. Curry intentionally spiked Eric's drink, a Moscow Mule, with a fatal amount of fentanyl on the night of his death. However, Curry's lawyer disputes this, stating that no fentanyl was found on the glassware at their home. Curry denies any involvement in Eric's death, insisting she had no reason to harm him. Curry's mother, Lisa, has expressed shock and confusion over the allegations, maintaining that they was happy and had no issues that would have led Curry to kill Eric. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Curry and Eric's relationship was not as perfect as it appeared. They had their differences, and Curry, a stay-at-home mother, craved independence. She was also annoyed by Eric's frequent hunting trips. Lisa claimed that Eric was having an affair, but his family denied this. They sought counseling, but Eric's family said it was because he loved his sons and wanted to make the marriage work. Eric considered divorce and took steps to protect his assets, secretly setting up a trust with his sister Katie. During the investigation, 6 life insurance policies on Eric were found, totaling $3 million. 2 months prior to his death, Curry had also forged Eric's signature on another policy valued at $100,000. It was also discovered that Curry had been embezzling money from Eric's personal accounts and misusing funds from his business over several years. Curry's financial situation was reportedly dire, despite claims that her house-flipping business was thriving. In reality, the business was millions of dollars in debt. According to Eric's family representative, Curry urgently needed money. A premarital agreement, signed by Curry, revealed that she had waived her claim to Eric's business assets. However, if Eric were to die before her while they were still married, she would inherit the assets. Curry's lawyer denied the claims that her business was in debt. They explained that taking out lines of credit was a normal part of the house flipping business, and that the debt would be paid off when the houses were sold. The lawyer also clarified that the large amount of debt mentioned by the spokesperson was simply a result of normal business transactions. Curry's mother, Lisa, stated that Eric had been very supportive of Curry's business ventures, especially when it came to buying Heejin, where they were celebrating on the night of his death. Heejin was situated on a 10-acre estate in Heber Valley, close to popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir. Curry discovered a long-abandoned mansion that had been built in 2017. She joined forces with a group of investors to make a substantial offer on the property, using their collective resources to finance the purchase. Her plan was to transform the estate into a popular recreational destination. Although Eric initially seemed to support the purchase, his family later disputed this claim. They recalled that Eric had strongly opposed the idea of buying Heejin and had even argued with Curry about it. The family's spokesperson made a shocking allegation on the night of Eric's death. Curry had given him a drink spiked with fentanyl. Furthermore, they claimed that this was not the first time Curry had attempted to harm Eric. Eric's family claims Curry tried to harm him twice. First, during a 2019 trip to Greece, they say Curry gave Eric a drink that made him violently ill. Curry's brother Ronnie disputes this, suggesting Eric was taking antibiotics and shouldn't have had liquor. Ronnie says the bartender may have made a mistake, preparing a drink with liquor instead of the virgin drink Eric ordered. A second incident allegedly occurred on Valentine's Day 2022, 1 month before Eric's death. Curry brought Eric a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and have trouble breathing. The court documents stated that 2 days after Eric's death, Curry punched his sister Amy in the neck and face when she tried to open a safe containing between $125,000 and $165,000 in cash. Curry claimed she was acting in self-defense when she tried to retrieve important documents from a safe. However, she was charged with assault a month after the incident and eventually pleaded no contest. In June 2023, Curry attended a bail hearing, which lasted 4 hours. During the hearing, prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence to support their claim that Curry had poisoned her husband. A cell phone expert testified about Google searches found on Curry's phone, including inquiries about retrieving deleted text messages from an iPhone, whether the FBI could access deleted messages, and the lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Curry's attorney argued that these searches were conducted after her husband's death, as Curry sought information to defend herself against accusations of murder. Prosecutors also contacted the lead detective involved in the case and questioned him about any potential sources that Curry could have used to obtain the drugs that were used to kill Eric. The detective shared information from an interview with Carmen Labor, a woman who claimed to work as a cleaner for Curry's business and home. In early 2022, Carmen told investigators about a conversation she had with Curry. Curry asked her to buy fentanyl for an investor who supposedly had a back injury. Carmen, who had a history of drug-related crimes and was on probation for distributing drugs at the time of the interview, agreed to Curry's request. She said she bought 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and later met with Curry to exchange them for cash. This exchange happened on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day, when Curry allegedly tried to poison Eric with a sandwich. During the investigation, Carmen told the detective that Curry contacted her again, asking for stronger drugs. This time, Carmen revealed that Curry paid her for the pills with a check. A week after Eric's death, Curry gave Carmen a $1,300 check. However, Curry's lawyer disputed this, suggesting that the check could have been for cleaning services instead of payment for drugs. The detective agreed that this was a possible explanation. Curry's lawyer also questioned Carmen's credibility, pointing out that she was a convicted felon on probation for serious crimes. The lawyer argued that Carmen's history made her an unreliable witness. They claimed that Carmen might have lied about selling the drugs because the detective told her she would face a long prison sentence if she didn't cooperate with the investigation. Curry's lawyer asked if there was any physical evidence to prove that Carmen had bought the drugs. The detective replied that no such evidence existed. Specifically, no text messages were found where Curry directly asked Carmen for drugs. Additionally, no witnesses came forward to confirm that they saw Carmen and Curry exchanging drugs. Eric's sister pleaded with the judge at the bail hearing to keep Curry in custody, sharing the family's trauma and concerns about reliving the horrific circumstances of Eric's death if Curry was released on bail. The judge granted the request and denied Curry bail. However, Curry's family was upset by the decision and worried about her well-being in jail. They felt that her time in custody was affecting her physically and mentally. Curry experienced a health scare in jail after taking prescribed medication. She suffered a seizure and was rushed to the hospital. She claimed that jail officials had given her the wrong medication, leading to severe side effects. Thankfully, Curry recovered after receiving medical treatment. Jail officials found a handwritten letter in Curry's cell after she was hospitalized. The letter was never sent, but it was included in the court records and presented by prosecutors as evidence. They claimed it was written by Curry to her mother and showed her intentions and motivations. Prosecutors asked the court to limit Curry's contact with her mother and brothers in November 2023. The main reason was the letter found in Curry's cell, which prosecutors said was an attempt to influence witnesses. They alleged that in the letter, Curry gave her mother instructions on how her brother Ronnie should behave in court. Curry allegedly asked Ronnie to lie about Eric's behavior during a trip to Mexico. Specifically, Curry wanted Ronnie to falsely testify that Eric had admitted to buying pain pills in Mexico. Curry also told Ronnie to gather text messages from Eric that discussed his drug use. Curry stressed the importance of linking Eric's activities in Mexico to his alleged involvement with drugs. However, Curry claimed that the letter was not an attempt to tamper with a witness, but rather a work of fiction. A judge agreed, stating that the prosecution had failed to prove that Curry was attempting to interfere with the testimony. Currently, Curry and her family are trying to gain custody of their 3 sons, who are living with a relative. Despite being in jail, Curry regularly talks to her children through video calls. Her family attends their public events, but is not allowed private visits with they. Curry faces severe penalties if found guilty of murdering her husband Eric by lacing his drink with fentanyl. She could receive a prison sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. Moreover, she is dealing with multiple civil lawsuits related to Eric's estate, including disputes over custody of their children. The outcome of these custody battles has significant financial implications, as control of the children grants control over Eric's estate, fueling tensions between Curry's and Eric's families. Curry's trial is expected to begin sometime in 2025. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi Fonseca Fernandez was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Not much is known about her early family life. Samadi grew up in Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. She attended a local school. Samadi often used force or deception to get what she wanted. Samadi's striking looks and perfect figure make her a magnet, especially to men. Samadi's beauty and charm are overshadowed by her greed, vanity, and self-interest, which ultimately drives men away. Furthermore, she is extremely jealous and aggressive. Samadi, due to her youthful resemblance to Barbie, spent several years working at a Universal Company bookstore, dressing up as the iconic doll. After graduating from high school, Samadi started a long-term relationship with Osvaldo Fernando Ballary, a local television journalist 16 years her senior. Their relationship resulted in the birth of children, Christopher in 1996 and Christina a year later. However, constant arguments and jealousy eventually led Samadi to end the relationship in 2012. Shortly after, Osvaldo, 53, died suddenly. Osvaldo did not include Samadi in his will. Samadi took drastic action and seized Osvaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent relatives and heirs from entering. Samadi also took away Osvaldo's valuables. Osvaldo's family was furious and took Samadi to court for theft. Police intervened and forced Samadi to leave the house, but no criminal charges were filed against her. Samadi had other relationships, most notably with Miguel Angel Perez, the father of Samadi's third daughter, Maria. Although some reports claim the couple were officially married, the relationship ended in divorce after a few years. It was strange that some of Samadi's lovers disappeared or died mysteriously under mysterious circumstances. But for a long time, for some reason, no one paid any attention to it. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samadi. He was murdered during a robbery. The killers were never caught or brought to justice. As with the previous case, there was much speculation surrounding Samadi's possible involvement, but there was no solid evidence linking her to the crime. Samadi's most famous victim was Gerardo Cruz. Gerardo Cruz, a native of Costa Rica, was born in December 1992 in the city of San Jose. Gerardo Cruz lived with his mother, Ana Patricia, who soon married a man named Hermes Rodriguez, who raised Gerardo Cruz as his own son. Gerardo Cruz attended a regular school, developed a passion for motorcycles, and met his future partner, Carol, at a young age. By the time he was 23, Gerardo had settled down with Carol and their 4-year-old daughter, Genesis, in the suburban home of his aunt and uncle in San Sebastian. To support his family, Gerardo Cruz took a job at a local bakery. It was around this time, in the summer of 2015, that Gerardo Cruz met Samadi, a 40-year-old woman who frequented the bakery. Despite her age, Samadi was attractive. Samadi began having affairs with men much younger than herself, because the attention of young lovers probably delighted Samadi. Gerardo Cruz was one such affair. Despite the significant age difference, Gerardo Cruz quickly fell in love with Samadi and began to meet secretly. Samadi came to the bakery every day to see Gerardo Cruz, and other employees took notice of Samadi's frequent visits. Samadi would bring his 19-year-old daughter, Cristina, with him to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo Cruz was able to balance his family life and secretly date Samad without either woman finding out. He eventually let his guard down. He began bragging about his success with women and began sharing stories with friends and colleagues about Samadi, describing her as a great mistress who showered him with gifts. After just a few months together, in October 2015, Samadi discovered the truth about Gerardo Cruz having a pregnant wife and a child. Samadi was so angry that she started calling and texting Carol, Gerardo Cruz's wife, insulting her and threatening to kill Gerardo Cruz if he didn't belong to her. Gerardo Cruz tried to beg Carol's forgiveness. As for Samadi, he did not take her threat seriously, believing that she would quickly calm down and find a new boyfriend. Just days after breaking up with Samadi, Gerardo Cruz saw a man secretly filming a young girl's underwear with his phone. Gerardo Cruz filmed the man, stopped the girl, and advised her to report the incident to the police. He then chased the man, trying to capture his face on camera, until the man escaped in a taxi. Gerardo Cruz posted the video online and it quickly went viral. The man was identified as Luis Somano Delgado, a former member of the Ministry of Finance. The media picked up the story, and Gerardo Cruz became a national celebrity, outing Luis Somano Delgado in interviews. However, Luis Somano Delgado's lawyer accused Gerardo Cruz of wrongdoing, claiming that the video's distribution was illegal and preparing to file a lawsuit. Gerardo Cruz was surprised, wondering why he was being prosecuted instead of the man who committed the crime. Gerardo Cruz gave a radio interview confidently, without fear. The next day, he canceled his meeting with Oswald, citing an emergency after receiving a text message from Samadi, supposedly to discuss another interview with a young woman in a park. Unsuspecting, Gerardo Cruz met with her, but instead of journalists, two men stole his bag, beat him, and stabbed him multiple times. Gerardo Cruz called Oswald when he was unconscious, and Oswald called the police and paramedics. Gerardo Cruz was taken to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. Gerardo Cruz underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful in saving his life. He passed away in the intensive care unit on November 19. Gerardo Cruz's funeral was attended by a large number of people who wanted to express their condolences to his family. The community came together to express their hope that the police would quickly apprehend the perpetrators and bring them to justice. Initially, the investigation explored multiple theories. The first was that Cruz was a victim of a robbery gone wrong. This seemed plausible, given that he was attacked in a park, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife. The first theory is that Gerardo Cruz was the victim of a botched robbery, as he was attacked in a park, his bag stolen, and stabbed. However, Gerardo Cruz recently released a video exposing a nationally known former official, which has fueled another theory, that the attack was a revenge killing. The media speculated that the former official, Somano Delgado, may have hired a hitman to silence Gerardo Cruz, who had tarnished his reputation. The murder has sparked widespread debate in the press. Police later identified and tracked down the two men. The footage was made public and shown repeatedly on news programs, with viewers encouraged to watch the footage closely. Soon after, the identity of one suspect was confirmed when he voluntarily surrendered to the police, cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a reduced sentence. The investigation quickly identified several accomplices and organizers of the crime, Samadi and her daughter Christina, thanks to information provided. Those involved, including taxi driver Ronald Archie, worker Cesar Chavez, a young miner, and Omar Costa, were arrested. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all those involved in the crime through phone calls and text messages. Samadi was identified as the mastermind who had carefully planned the murder for his daughter Christina. They enlisted the help of friends Ronald Archie and Cesar Chavez to find two assassins to kill Gerardo Cruz and stage a robbery in the park at night. Omar Costa later joined the plot, tasked with ensuring Gerardo Cruz was present at the park. Samadi chose October 7th as the date of the massacre. Samadi kept in constant contact with all the suspects, assigning roles and ensuring everyone followed the plan. Furthermore, Samadi asked the participants to take an item from Gerardo Cruz as proof that the crime had been completed. The evidence against Samadi was a series of text messages outlining the murder plan and the roles of each participant in detail. The motive behind the crime was a case of jealousy. She had carefully planned the crime and even involved her own daughter, who assisted her in every step of the process. Both Samadi and her daughter were taken into custody immediately, and the possibility of releasing them on bail was ruled out due to concerns that they would attempt to flee the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar Costa, who was responsible for surveillance and was the youngest participant in the crime. As a minor, Omar Costa was handed over to authorities that specialize in handling juvenile offenders. The investigation took about a year and a half to complete, and the trial did not begin until December 2017. It was discovered that Samadi had a history of criminal activity. The verdict was not announced until January 23, 2018. According to the court decision, Samadi was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Her daughter, as well as Ronald Archie and Cesar Chavez, received 25 years in prison each. Omar Costa, on the other hand, who had been following the victim, was acquitted. Gerardo Cruz's family has received $140,000 in moral damages. After the verdict was announced, relatives expressed gratitude to the court for giving Gerardo Cruz's killers a fair punishment. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Mike Williams. Jerry Michael Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, just north of Tallahassee. His parents worked as a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. To those close to him, he was known as Mike. Despite financial struggles, which led to Mike and his older brother being raised in a trailer, but their childhood was filled with happiness. Furthermore, Mike's parents prioritized their son's education, setting aside money for their future instead of building a new home. Both boys attended North Florida Christian High School, where Mike excelled academically and socially. He served as student council president, played soccer, and actively participated in the Key Club. At 15, Mike developed a passion for duck hunting and met Denise Merrill, a cheerleader and council secretary. They began dating and formed a close bond. Their friends viewed Mike and Denise as a well-suited couple. During high school, Denise introduced Mike to Brian Winchester, and they became inseparable friends. Brian later befriended Kathy Thomas, and the two couples remained lifelong friends. After graduating from high school, Mike attended Florida State University, where he studied political science and urban planning. Denise and Mike graduated together, with Denise becoming a public accountant and Mike pursuing a career as a real estate appraiser. Mike was a hardworking individual who consistently put in 15-hour days, which ultimately led to his rapid career advancement. His personal life also flourished, as he married Denise in 1994. Around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The two couples remained close friends. Mike was deeply devoted to his wife and worked tirelessly to provide for their family, exhibiting remarkable enthusiasm and dedication. At 31, Mike Williams was thriving as a real estate appraiser, earning nearly $200,000 annually. He and his wife lived in a small upscale neighborhood on the east side of town and welcomed a daughter, Ensley, in 1999. Despite engaging in risky activities, but he was always cautious and wanted to ensure that his family would be well provided for in the event of an emergency. He turned to his best friend, Brian, an insurance agent, to purchase 2 insurance policies, one for $250,000 and another for $500,000. After his father's sudden death in 2000, Mike felt a strong need to secure his family's financial future, so he turned to a friend for help again. Brian assisted him in obtaining a life insurance policy with a value of $1 million. 6 months before Mike disappeared, he bought life insurance worth nearly $2 million. On December 16, 2000, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. It was Mike's 6th wedding anniversary, and he planned to celebrate with his wife Denise that night. However, when Denise and their daughter waited for Mike to return home at noon, he failed to show up. Denise became concerned and called her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father went to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but there was no sign of Mike. They searched the areas where Mike liked to hunt but couldn't find him or his boat. They decided to contact the police. Investigators from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency were called in, and a search for Mike began. Later, a helicopter pilot spotted the boat drifting 225 feet from the boat ramp. When the boat was searched, Mike's shotgun was found, still in its case, shows that he has not used it. The search operation shifted from rescue to recovery. Locals believe the area was once an orchard before the 3 rivers were dammed to create the lake. The lake was nicknamed Stump Field due to the numerous remaining tree stumps above and below the waterline, which posed a hazard to motorized boats. Searchers hypothesized that Mike's boat struck a stump, causing him to fall into the water. His boots, filled with water, may have weighed him down, leading to his possible drowning. Additional agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, joined the search. Despite a thorough search, but no signs of Mike were found. As the days passed, the operation transitioned from rescue to a body recovery mission. Search teams used probe poles to scour the lake's bottom, and service dogs were brought in to assist. 10 days after, a hunting hat with a camouflage pattern was found, but there was no evidence connecting it to Mike. Officials from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency speculated that Mike might have been consumed by alligators, which were abundant in the lake. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement found no evidence of foul play, reinforcing the theory that the incident was accidental. After a 5-week search, the effort to find Mike was halted. The following day, Denise organized a memorial service for her husband. Although Denise seemed to have accepted Mike's departure, his mother still found it difficult to accept. 6 months later, in June 2001, a fisherman discovered a pair of boots floating in the lake. A dive team searched the area and found a hunting jacket and a working flashlight on the lake floor. Inside the jacket pocket was Mike's hunting license, complete with his name and signature. The discovery raised several questions. Notably, neither the jacket nor the boots showed signs of an alligator attack, such as teeth marks. Additionally, none of the items appeared to have been in the water for 6 months, as the boots were not slimy. A week after the discovery, Denise's lawyer petitioned the court to declare Mike dead, citing the found items as evidence. The lawyers suggested that aquatic life, including alligators, might have consumed Mike's body entirely. The court approved this, and a death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. Mike's body was never recovered. Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continues to search for her son, although this causes tension in her relationship with Denise. Denise demanded Cheryl stop searching and accept reality, threatening that if she continued, she would never see her granddaughter again. Cheryl refused to give up. She was determined to find Mike. Her perseverance ultimately led to the reopening of the investigation into Mike's disappearance. It took Cheryl 3 years of tireless efforts, including making phone calls, putting up signs, writing to the governor of Florida, compiling evidence, and contacting reporters to convince law enforcement officials to open an investigation into Mike's disappearance. Cheryl later revealed that her contacted Matthew Oresco, an expert on alligators. Oresco explained that alligators do not eat during the cold winter months due to low water temperatures, and their main priority is maintaining body heat. Temperatures as low as 14 degrees make alligators uninterested in food. Additionally, according to Oresco, alligator attacks always leave behind forensic evidence. 3 years later, Cheryl convinced law enforcement to dismiss the alligator theory and start a formal investigation into her son's disappearance. New discoveries regarding the behavior of alligators prompted a re-examination of the case. Evidence from interviews and data suggested that Mike's death was not an accident. Former investigator Ronnie Austin stated, "My instinct tells me Mike did not die in Lake Seminole, and that's what most law enforcement agencies working on this case agree on." Austin worked on Mike's case at the 2nd District State's Attorney's Office. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency initially handled the case as a missing hunter incident. They dedicated 735 hours to searching a 10-acre area of the lake for Mike's body, but surprisingly they did not find any signs of crime. Years later, those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene, expressed that several things seemed unusual from the start. Firstly, it was unusual for Mike to hunt alone. Additionally, his truck was found in an undeveloped area, which would have required him to drag the boat through mud, rather than using the nearby concrete boat launch that he typically used. The severe storm that night should have pushed the boat towards the east shore, but it was instead found on the west shore. Additionally, the boat's motor was not running, yet it was still full of gasoline. If Mike had been operating the boat and fallen out, the boat would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of fuel. Law enforcement initially believed Mike's death was a simple drowning, but they later began to suspect foul play. However, by that time, the crime scene had already been trampled by numerous volunteers and searchers. A vital piece of evidence, a vehicle, was taken by Mike's family without being inspected by investigators. Additionally, some potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise and Brian were identified as suspects when investigators found out that Brian had just gone through a divorce from his previous wife, Kathy, and then quickly married Denise. Furthermore, Denise had received nearly $2 million from Mike's life insurance policy. Detectives also found it suspicious that Brian had sold Mike the policy. The investigation raised more red flags when Denise, Mike's wife, showed no interest in helping with the investigation and tried to prevent Mrs. Cheryl from participating in the search. Denise even prohibited Cheryl from speaking with her granddaughter. When questioned, Brian provided an alibi, claiming he was at home, 60 miles from the lake, on the morning of Mike's disappearance. His ex-wife, Kathy, corroborated his story. Brian also mentioned that he had planned to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning but overslept. Denise's interrogation did not reveal any new information. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement concluded that Mike's disappearance was not an accident, which is a criminal offense. However, due to insufficient evidence, they were unable to prosecute. Despite this, Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, continued to seek answers. The case was featured on the Discovery Cable Channel in 2011, but Cheryl became increasingly frustrated with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, feeling that they were either incompetent or uninterested in solving the case. In 2012, she began writing daily letters to Governor Rick Scott, requesting that he either reassign the investigation to another agency or appoint a special prosecutor. Over the course of 9 years, Cheryl sent 2,600 letters to the governor. Meanwhile, Denise and Brian's marriage was deteriorating. In 2012, Denise discovered Brian's infidelity, leading to their breakup. Denise filed for divorce the following year. During the lengthy divorce proceedings, an appraisal of their former home was scheduled in an effort to resolve their property disputes. This brought progress in Mike's case, as tensions between Denise and Brian reached a boiling point. Brian wanted to continue the marriage, but Denise wanted a divorce because they were constantly arguing, and things were further complicated by the stress of Mike's investigation. Brian started calling Denise repeatedly, but she stopped answering his calls. He became overwhelmed by the stress in their relationship. On August 5, 2016, Denise was set to have her home appraised as part of a court order. That morning, she left her home to drive to work at Florida State University. While speaking with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing over the back seat of her car. It was Brian. Brian pressed a loaded gun against Denise's and instructed her to drive straight ahead. Brian said he did this extreme thing because she had quit answering his phone calls. Denise attempted to calm Brian down by agreeing with him and promising to give their marriage another chance. Brian seemed to believe her. Denise assured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the vehicle. As he left, he took several items with him, including a brown sheet, plastic sheeting, a bleach sprayer, and tools. It became clear that Denise had narrowly escaped a potentially fatal situation. She immediately called emergency services, and Brian was quickly arrested. He was charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida that carries a maximum life sentence. He also faced charges of domestic violence and burglary. The court ordered Brian to be held without bail. Cheryl Williams expressed hope that Brian's arrest might lead to a breakthrough in her son's case. Cheryl shared with the New York Daily News, Brian did not want Denise to keep all that money for herself. Cheryl hoped Brian will reveal what really happened. And ultimately, Brian did share what had transpired. Brian managed to negotiate a very favorable deal with the prosecutor, avoiding a life sentence, and then began telling his story. He explained that it all started when he discovered a note in Kathy's purse, revealing that she was cheating on him. This sparked a desire for revenge in Brian. Around that time, Brian and his friends, including Denise and her husband Mike, would often go to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but he had never been attracted to her until Kathy's infidelity. His perspective on Denise changed after being cheated on. In October 1997, Brian and Denise started an affair. Initially, it was just a casual encounter at a rock concert, but it quickly developed into regular and secret dates. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever they had the chance. Brian made it clear that he did not want to divorce Kathy, and Denise was adamant that she would never leave her husband Mike, as she cared deeply about public opinion and did not want to risk losing custody of her daughter. As their relationship progresses, it deepens and they begin to consider themselves a couple, often exchanging gifts and writing romantic letters to each other. They realized they couldn't continue living like this, as they couldn't bear to be apart. However, Denise did not think about getting a divorce because she wanted people to think she was a good and moral person. Around this time, Mike had a near-death experience in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. This gave Denise a ray of hope that they could get out of their current situation. After negotiating the deal with the prosecutor, Brian revealed that in the year 2000, he and Denise started discussing the possibility of Mike and Kathy dying. Denise wanted to make it look like an accident rather than a murder. After considering various options, Brian and Denise planned to fake a boating accident. This would allow them to collect the maximum amount from Mike's life insurance policy before it expired at the end of December 2000. They devised a plan, and Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip to a spot on Lake Simol's shores, telling him to bring his wading boots. The boots were crucial, as it was believed that wearing them would lead to rapid drowning if Mike fell overboard. However, when Brian pushed Mike into the water, the plan didn't unfold as expected. Instead of sinking, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and began wading towards the shore. Brian was in a state of panic. He didn't know how to handle the situation. Mike was loudly calling for help, and Brian felt overwhelmed. In his panic, Brian grabbed his shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking. The plan had gone terribly wrong, and now Brian had to cover up the incident. Time was running out because he had to go home and prepare for a hunting trip with his father-in-law. Since no one knew Brian was at the lake with Mike, he decided to return home and pretend he had overslept. He drove back, hoping to find his wife, Kathy, still asleep. Brian entered the house quietly, finding Kathy asleep and his phone on the floor. He went to bed, called his father-in-law to apologize, and began creating an alibi for himself. Meanwhile, he hid Mike's body. Denise didn't know what really happened when Mike went missing. Brian attempted to confess to her, but she refused to listen. She preferred to believe that Mike's disappearance was an act of God, allowing her to move on with her life. According to Brian, he and Denise made a promise to each other to keep the truth hidden forever. Denise and Brian claimed that Mike's death was necessary because they couldn't live together. They stated that the life insurance payout was just an added benefit. Brian would later testify in court. However, investigators discovered that Brian had planted evidence, including a hat, boots, flashlight, and license, to mislead searchers and create false evidence to declare Mike dead, allowing Denise to collect the insurance. Denise received around $2 million, including Social Security and other benefits. On May 8, 2018, Denise was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and accessory to a felony, carrying a life sentence. She pleaded not guilty to all charges. In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison. 5 months later, her daughter Ansley received Mike's assets and insurance payout. Denise appealed the conviction and life sentence in January 2020. Her attorney arguing before the Florida 1st District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence of her direct involvement in the murder. In November 2020, Denise's murder conviction was overturned. However, her 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld, and she is currently serving her sentence at the Florida Women's Reception Center. Denise is expected to be released when she is 78 years old. Brian was transferred to the Madison Correctional Institute in Florida to serve the remainder of his sentence. He is scheduled to be released on July 30, 2036, when he will be 67 years old. Ansley, Mike and Denise's daughter, maintains her mother's innocence and blames Brian. Ansley has refused to speak to the media about the case and personal life. According to Cheryl and Nick, Ansley's uncle, they have been unable to reconnect with Ansley. Cheryl expressed her sorrow, stating that she has not only lost her son, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Karen Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was born in 1987 in Bolivia. As the eldest of 7 siblings, he learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from an early age. He dreamed of having a happy family filled with the joy and laughter of children. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez and she bore him a son. Even though they divorced, they still maintain a good relationship. Then Soledad Gardio entered his life and they had another son named Elias. Although the relationship with Soledad did not last long, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He still kept in touch and maintained warm relationships with Carolina and Soledad. From an early age, Rolando was very active and passionate about sports, including football, and he played for a local team. Friends and family described him as kind and very hardworking. He got along well with his neighbors and was known for being exceptionally sociable. During a local soccer match, Rolando was attracted to Karen. Rolando and Karen soon developed a romance. A chance meeting led to true happiness. In 2016, Rolando and Karen lived together and opened a business at home. Karen was born on March 30, 1990, and grew up in Manado. Famous for being extroverted and open-minded, Karen always wanted to have a happy family. Before meeting Rolando, she married Rul, and then she and Rul had 2 beautiful daughters. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Financial difficulties were the main cause of their arguments, and they soon divorced. Rolando and Karen's lives passed peacefully, but a tragedy occurred. In the summer of 2019, Rolando's son, 9-year-old Elias, came to Rolando's house to visit him in the afternoon. That evening was filled with laughter from Elias, Rolando, and even Karen. However, the next morning, July 12, 2019, Rolando noticed that Elias was not feeling well. Rolando quickly contacted the family of his ex-wife, Soledad, and quickly took his son to the children's hospital. When Elias was transported to the hospital, pediatricians realized that Elias's condition was critical, requiring immediate transfer to the intensive care unit. Despite the efforts of medical staff, Elias died shortly after arriving at the hospital. What was puzzling was that Elias arrived at his father's house in completely normal health. Medical reports revealed that Elias died of third-degree poisoning, leading to multiple organ failure and cerebral thrombosis. This left Rolando and his ex-wife, Soledad, completely devastated. Doctors recommended additional forensic examinations. However, Soledad and Elias's grandmother refused the procedure. Karen then offered to cremate the boy's body, but Soledad instead chose to bury him in a private cemetery. Elias's death left Rolando completely anguished. He was greatly saddened by the sudden passing of his youngest son. Karen, caring and loving, was always by Rolando's side. She arranged everything, supported her boyfriend, and helped him overcome his pain and grief. Over time, with Karen's warmth and care, Rolando's pain began to ease. 16 months later, Rolando proposed to Karen. They got married, and Rolando believed that she would always be with him. However, their happiness was short-lived. Karen's life took a different turn on February 6, 2022, when she returned home from a gym session to find her husband Rolando extremely unwell. The next day, a medical ambulance was seen outside their home. 35-year-old Rolando had collapsed in the living room after vomiting violently. Emergency medical services quickly arrived, and Rolando was taken to Santa Maria Clinic. The medical team's efforts to save Rolando were ultimately unsuccessful. Rolando died on February 9 from severe poisoning. When medical staff began questioning Karen, they learned that Rolando had been taking medication for skin discoloration. However, this information only increased their suspicions. Closer examination of Rolando's body revealed an overdose of calcium oxalate crystals, which were often a sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, commonly used in automotive antifreeze. This mysterious and unexpected death led to an investigation into Rolando's death, and the authorities were determined to get to the bottom of it. The prosecutor's office questioned Rolando and Karen's neighbors, who revealed that Karen had repeatedly given her husband an unknown drug. Although Karen initially claimed it was a cure for Rolando's skin blemishes, neighbors remained suspicious, which led investigators to look into Karen. During the investigation, Karen was thoroughly questioned about the events surrounding her husband's death. Many conflicts arose during her interrogation. When asked about the substance she gave her husband before he died, Karen confirmed that it was a medicine to treat dark spots on her skin that she used through an intravenous infusion. However, she could not provide the potion because the housekeeper had thrown it away. Further investigation led to an interview with the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, who contradicted Karen's statement about the disposal of the jar. Claudia also said she overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with the medication he was taking. As a result, Karen was detained by the police and her cell phone was confiscated for further investigation. Rolando's sudden death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Rolando's ex-wife, Karen's ex-husband, was especially stunned by rumors that Rolando's death might have been an act of intentional poisoning. Further investigation revealed disturbing evidence. A search of Karen's phone revealed she had researched the most dangerous toxins online and had found a way to delete her search history. Additionally, records showed she had ordered ethylene glycol, a toxic substance used in the manufacture of antifreeze, from an online store on 2 separate occasions. This substance is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely dangerous to humans. Based on preliminary forensic results and collected evidence, the prosecutor's office charged Karen with intentionally poisoning Rolando. It is believed that she mixed the toxic substance with the orange juice that Rolando drank, causing his health to seriously decline and ultimately leading to his death. By mid-February, evidence against Karen had been collected, and Karen had been charged with capital murder. At the same time, investigators had begun looking into suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of 9-year-old Elias. A thorough investigation into Elias' medical history had been initiated by the prosecutor's office. According to the boy's mother, Elias had been in good health until he suddenly fell into a coma at his father's house and never recovered. Elias's death certificate had stated that his body had suffered from cerebral thrombosis. However, investigators had found this explanation suspicious, especially since Elias had been young and he had been in good health. As part of the investigation, the prosecutor's office had requested information about any purchases of ethylene glycol. Karen had been found to have purchased the poison on July 2, 2019, just before Elias had arrived at Aquino's residence. Relatives of Elias had also provided valuable information, revealing that Karen had urged the boy's body to be cremated, but his biological mother had instead chosen a traditional burial. These findings had been enough for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file more serious murder charges against Karen, accusing her of poisoning Elias. A judge had then ordered Karen detained pending trial on March 14. After she had tried to appeal the decision, the judge had overruled her, concluding that Karen would have to remain in detention until the trial began. Karen's highly publicized trial had begun on November 28, 2022, at Mendoza Criminal Court, attracting widespread public and media attention. 2 separate indictments had been pending against Karen, one for the murder of Elias, headed by prosecutor Fernando Gudo, and another for the murder of Rolando, headed by Claudia Rios. During the trial, Javier Aquino, Rolando's 15-year-old son, had appeared as the plaintiff, along with his lawyer. Prosecutor Fernando had presented the case, accusing Karen of poisoning Elias and Rolando by mixing ethylene glycol with orange juice, leading to severe poisoning and death. Karen's defense team had disputed the charges, claiming Rolando had a history of violence and abuse of their client. They had asserted that there had been no reliable evidence to support the allegations and that Karen had had no motive for murder. The defense had questioned why Karen would have killed Elias, who had posed no threat to her. They had also pointed out that Karen had been the sole owner of the house, car, and business and that she had not made any suspicious purchases using her phone. Furthermore, the defense had argued that if Karen had used ethylene glycol to poison Elias, as the prosecutor had claimed, then her search for information about the poison on the internet would have made no sense. The defense had emphasized that although the deaths of Rolando and Elias had been heinous crimes, it had been necessary to clearly prove Karen's guilt before prosecuting her. Karen's defense team had tried to claim the allegations against her had been false. Karen had said that Rolando had bought the antifreeze by hacking into her account instead of buying it herself. Additionally, Karen had claimed to have had an alibi for the day her husband had been poisoned on February 6th, saying she had not been home when he had first shown symptoms. As the trial had continued, the prosecution had asked Karen a number of questions. An important point addressed by Prosecutor Fernando had been whether Karen had offered to cremate her deceased son, Rolando. Karen had firmly replied that she had had no say in the matter and had never suggested cremation. The prosecution presented relatives of Rolando as witnesses to provide more insight into the events surrounding the death. Elias's mother, Soledad, testified that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karen had suggested cremating Elias's body so both families could keep his ashes. However, Soledad refused this idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karen's jealousy. According to Soledad, Karen's jealousy was so intense that she and Rolando slept in separate beds. Another witness, Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, confirmed that Rolando and Karen slept separately, as her ex-husband had told her. Although Carolina had not interacted with Karen before the incident, Karen called her on the morning of February 8th to inform her that Rolando was in the hospital due to illness. Karen claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell. She also asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was having an affair. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. After speaking with Karen, Carolina learned that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. The trial continued with doctors and experts presenting crucial forensic evidence and the results of a psychological examination to the jury. This new information shed light on previously overlooked details. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician who treated Elias in July 2019, explained how the boy was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing difficulties and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a deep cerebral thrombosis, and Elias received intensive care. Dr. Ivana confirmed that Elias's symptoms were consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning, including impaired consciousness, restlessness, and a coma accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. The jury also reviewed the results of Karen's psychological examination, which was conducted at the prosecution's request. The experts found that Karen had lied and concealed the truth. The examination revealed that Karen showed no emotional response to her husband's death, raising doubts about her sincerity. The prosecutor questioned whether Karen had truly been a victim of domestic violence as she had claimed in her statement. This information provided insight into Karen's psychological profile. After weeks of waiting and many court hearings, the trial was finally over. The jury delivered a unanimous verdict after a lengthy period of silence and anticipation. Karen was found guilty of murdering Elias with exceptional cruelty and of causing Rolando's death through a particularly heinous process. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison. Karen had attempted to evade punishment for the brutal murders that shocked the community and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies was likely a last-ditch effort to avoid accountability. However, the court and jury remained resolute, ultimately rendering a fair and just verdict. Karen's decision to harm her loved ones remains a puzzle. Despite having everything for a happy life, her motivations may be rooted in emotions like jealousy. This tragic case reminds us that even close relationships can conceal dark secrets, and genuine love and loyalty should always be the top priority. Mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Neil Entwistle. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978, in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England, to Clifford and Yvonne Entwistle. He grew up in a humble home with his younger brother, Russell. His father worked as a coal miner before becoming a labor councillor, while his mother worked as a cook in a school cafeteria. After finishing high school, Neil Entwistle enrolled in the University of York, where he studied electronic engineering and business management. During this time, Entwistle met an American student named Rachel Souza who was attending York as a study abroad student. Rachel was originally from the Kingston area in Massachusetts, had attended Silver Lake Region High School before going to Holy Cross College in Worcester. While studying abroad in York for a year, she met Neil Entwistle on the rowing team. Neil Entwistle was withdrawn, shy, and indecisive, rarely interacting with others. Rachel, on the other hand, exuded confidence, was cheerful, outgoing, and well-liked. Her American roots brought an undeniable charm to her personality, and Rachel was well received by the other members of the rowing team. Over time, Neil Entwistle and Rachel found themselves drawn to each other, eventually spending more and more time together. Benjamin Pryor, a close friend of Neil Entwistle and Rachel's since college, said the couple were very understanding, affectionate and caring towards each other. While Neil Entwistle worked at a defense and security technology company based in Malvern, Worcestershire, Rachel pursued a career in education after completing her studies in 2002. Rachel took up a teaching role in English, drama and theater studies at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Redditch, nurturing young minds through the arts. In a post on Friends Reunited in June 2003, Neil Entwistle happily shared about his upcoming marriage to Rachel. They met through rowing, although he expressed dissatisfaction with life south of the border in Birmingham. He was happy with his upcoming marriage. In August 2003, Neil Entwistle and Rachel got married in two ceremonies, one in Plymouth, UK, and the other in Massachusetts, USA. After the US ceremony, they had a reception in the UK in November of the same year. Neil Entwistle shared the early days of their married life on a family website, including their Christmas 2004 trip to the Mediterranean. In April 2005, their daughter, Lillian Rose, was born. Neil Entwistle and Rachel decided to move to the United States. They initially lived with Rachel's mother and stepfather in Carver, Massachusetts, until they purchased their own home in Hopkinton on January 12, 2006. Their new home was located on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, creating a peaceful setting close to a major city. Despite Neil Entwistle's efforts to find work as a computer programmer and IT specialist, he encountered difficulties in finding work, leading to financial stress and mounting debt. To ease the financial burden, Neil Entwistle turned to selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business was affected by customer complaints about undelivered orders, forcing eBay to investigate fraud. An investigation into Neil Entwistle's eBay activities uncovered that he was using multiple accounts under different names. Further investigation revealed that Neil Entwistle was involved in running a website called millimaker.co.uk. This website promoted a get-rich-quick scheme that promised to help people in the adult entertainment industry make a guaranteed $6,000 per month within 6 months. The website also claimed to offer 24/7 assistance. However, these claims ultimately led to the website being shut down. Neil Entwistle used online platforms to find sexual partners. He visited several websites to pursue relationships looking for sexual partners. On Adult Friend Finder, Neil Entwistle created a profile and emailed several women expressing his interest in meeting sexual partners. An investigation found incriminating evidence on Neil Entwistle's laptop. In his profile, Neil Entwistle stated that he was interested in meeting American women of different ages. Neil Entwistle also mentioned that he wanted to confirm whether American women were better in bed than women from other countries. Neil Entwistle's profile indicated that he was looking for a specific type of casual relationship and was open to meeting people with similar interests. Testimony at the trial revealed Neil Entwistle had continued his interest in escort services up to January 18, 2006. Online searches he conducted on Google included Blonde Bay Escort Service, Sex Escort Services Westboro, and Escort in Worcester. In their defense, Neil Entwistle's lawyers claimed that his wife, Rachel, was dissatisfied with their sex life. However, when reviewing Neil Entwistle's internet search history, it is revealed that Neil Entwistle had much darker motives than seeking out prostitutes and seeking relationships with other women. During this time, Neil Entwistle visited his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo, in Carver, Massachusetts. Joe Matarazzo, a member of the Old Colony Sporting Club, had previously taught Neil Entwistle how to shoot. Neil Entwistle also had a .22 caliber revolver with Joe Matarazzo's family. However, on this occasion, Neil Entwistle planned to steal a gun from Joe Matarazzo's family. Neil Entwistle went to his in-laws' home, found a hidden gun, and took it back to his house in Hopkinton. Once home, he secretly hid the firearm, waiting for the right moment to carry out a violent act against his family. On January 20, 2006, Neil Entwistle entered the master bedroom of his home, where his wife, Rachel, and their 9-month-old daughter, Lillian, were sleeping in their new bed. Neil Entwistle shot Rachel in the head and then shot Lillian, who was lying next to her. The bullet passed through Lillian's body and also hit Rachel in the left chest. Later that day, Neil Entwistle returned to Carver with the uncleaned weapon. He would later claim that he had gone shopping at Staples on that Friday and discovered his family dead when he got home. After leaving Carver, Neil Entwistle drove to Boston's Logan Airport on the evening of January 20, 2006. At the airport, he made 2 successful ATM withdrawals totaling $800, but 3 additional attempts to withdraw $420 were declined. The next day, January 21, 2006, Neil Entwistle bought a one-way ticket to London without checking any luggage. He boarded a British Airways flight that departed Boston at 8:15 p.m. that evening. Unbeknownst to Neil Entwistle, several neighbors he had invited for dinner, including Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen, arrived at his home around 7 p.m. to find it locked with the lights on inside. Concerned for Rachel's safety, neighbors attempted to contact her mother, but were unable to reach her. They then called 911 at around 8:30. Police arrived at Neil Entwistle's home to search for clues about the missing family. Upon entering, Sergeant Michael Sutton observed the bedroom, noticing a large unmade bed, but nothing unusual. After completing their search, the police locked the house and left. However, Joanna Gatley and Maureen were still worried and decided to spend the night in the car outside the house, hoping that Rachel's family would return. To cope with the cold weather, they made several trips to the gas station restroom. The following Sunday morning, Joanna Gatley and Maureen gained entry to the house using the garage door code they had obtained from a next-door neighbor the night before. Inside, Joanna Gatley and Maureen discovered dishes and leftover food in the kitchen, indicating that the family had just finished eating. The bathtub was still full of water, indicating that the couple had bathed their infant daughter. They proceeded to the master bedroom, then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally checked the living room. Rachel's mother and stepfather then arrived at Rachel's house, and together they searched around the house. After assessing the situation, they decided to report the family missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. The police arrived at Rachel's house. Sergeant Sutton entered the basement and detected a foul odor. He followed the stench into the house to the master bedroom, where he found the bodies of Rachel and her infant child, Lillian. The mother's body was lying on a bed, covered in clothes. Rachel had her arms spread across Lillian's chest, both of them wearing pajamas. Autopsy results showed that Rachel died from a gunshot wound to the head, while Lillian was shot in the torso. DNA evidence was also found on the barrel of the gun and on the butt of the gun, belonging to Neil Entwistle. About 36 hours after returning to England, Neil Entwistle visited his parents, Cliff and Yvonne. He told them that he had been driving around and had spent the previous night in a hotel. During this visit, Neil Entwistle revealed to his parents that he had discovered the bodies of his wife and daughter. On January 23, 2006, Neil Entwistle had a 2-hour telephone conversation with Hopkinton Police, which was recorded. On January 26, 2006, U.S. law enforcement officials traveled to the UK to interview Neil Entwistle. The next day, after consulting with a lawyer at the U.S. Embassy in London, Neil Entwistle chose not to cooperate with the American detectives. Meanwhile, Rachel and her daughter Lillian were buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza, sharing a single grave, with around 500 people attending the funeral to pay their respects. However, Neil Entwistle was absent from the ceremony, and Neil Entwistle's name was not mentioned in the proceedings or inscribed on the headstone. Despite this, Neil Entwistle sent a bouquet of flowers, consisting of an orange rose and a white lily, with a note that read, "My orange roses and lilies forever," signed Sakoko. After returning to the UK, Neil Entwistle resumed his normal life in February 2006. However, the media continued to gather outside his parents' home in Worksop. Neil Entwistle went to Notting Hill for dinner with his old crew from York University, followed by a trip to the cinema. Just a week after the funeral, on February 8, 2006, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office issued an arrest warrant for Neil Entwistle. The following day, February 9, 2006, Neil Entwistle was arrested by police at Royal Oak Station as he was about to board a train. Neil Entwistle was returned to the United States on February 15 and appeared in court, where he was denied bail and held at the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On March 28, 2006, Neil Entwistle was formally charged with murder and illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. Neil Entwistle pleaded not guilty despite the charges against him. Almost a year after the incident, in December 2006, authorities at Middlesex County Jail found letters Neil Entwistle had written to his parents and lawyers. These letters showed that Neil Entwistle was depressed and might be thinking about killing himself. As a result, he was moved to Bridgewater Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being sent back to Middlesex County. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordes believed that Neil Entwistle's behavior was caused by Asperger's syndrome, a view that was shared by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, the process of choosing jurors for Neil Entwistle's trial at Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. The trial for the double murder of Neil Entwistle's wife and daughter began on June 2, 2008, in Warren, Massachusetts. Elliot Weinstein led the defense team for Neil Entwistle. During the trial, Elliot attempted to object to the prosecution's plan to introduce DNA evidence, but was unsuccessful. Elliot also attempted to suppress other evidence found in the family home, arguing that it was taken without a warrant, but this effort was also unsuccessful. Neil Entwistle chose not to call any witnesses or testify during the trial. Notably, Neil Entwistle showed little emotion throughout the proceedings. On June 25, 2008, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Neil Entwistle of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition. As a result, Neil Entwistle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite the severe sentence, Neil Entwistle appeared calm as he left the courtroom. Neil Entwistle was incarcerated at the Souza Baranowski Correctional Center. In August 2008, he became the victim of a hoax when he shaved his head to seek protection from a white supremacist prison gang. However, instead of receiving protection, the gang threatened Neil Entwistle's life. After this incident, Neil Entwistle was placed in protective custody. He was then transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a prison located in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, in December. The tragic death of Rachel and her infant daughter has left a lasting legacy of grief for the family and those who loved them. In the face of this tragic loss, the community has come together to support and comfort the grieving family. The case of Irene Cortez. Irene Cortez was born in 1980 in Granada, Spain. She is the eldest of a well-off family with a younger brother and sister. Her parents ran a small business, but her father died early. Her mother, Maria Lucas, took over and expanded the business, ensuring that her children did not lack anything. Irene was a beautiful, sociable girl who loved to be the center of attention. She married and became pregnant at the age of 17, then had a second child 2 years later. With the support of her mother and uncle, she continued to pursue education. In the early 2000s, Irene with her husband and 2 children moved to the resort city of Malaga and opened a disco bar. The bar became popular. The bar later transformed into a full-fledged nightclub and brought her profits. The couple welcomed their 3rd child and life seemed prosperous and stable. However, at the age of 25, Irene's husband was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison for trafficking illegal narcotics. He later died in prison under mysterious circumstances. Irene was left to raise her children on her own. She remembered how her mother had raised 3 children on her own and was determined to persevere. Irene successfully ran her own business, made a lot of money and had big plans for the future. In Malaga, Irene was immediately impressed by the hardworking and reliable man named Ferd. She was also attracted to him and Ferd always tried to please her. At the time, Irene's husband was in prison and she planned to file for divorce, but he died before she could do so. Irene and Ferd's relationship gradually blossomed into love. Ferd Saras, born in Baronia, Colombia, grew up in a large and poor family. When he was young, his parents separated in the early 90s. His siblings became independent and he lived with his mother. In 2001, Ferd and his elderly mother moved to Spain in search of a better life. They settled in Malaga, where Ferd took any job he could find to support himself and his mother. Despite Ferd's humble background and Irene's 3 children from previous relationships, Ferd and Irene decided to move in together. They settled in Irene's spacious apartment and soon after, Irene became pregnant with their first child. Their marriage produced a total of 3 children. However, it is unclear whether they were officially married. Irene kept her first husband's surname, while the children born to Ferd were given the surname Saras. In 2009, Irene's life took a negative turn. Ferd was arrested for drug trafficking and sentenced to prison, just like her first husband. Irene was left to care for her 5 children alone. Although Ferd's sentence was 3 years, he was pardoned after serving only a year and a half for his good behavior and cooperation during the investigation. While Ferd was in prison, Irene began a relationship with another man and lived with him. However, when Ferd was released and discovered Irene's infidelity, he became furious. He threatened Irene and her new boyfriend, even intending to injure the man. Fortunately, the situation was resolved without becoming a serious problem. Later, Ferd decided to forgive Irene for the sake of their children's happiness and they decided to continue living together. However, Irene's relatives were still suspicious of Ferd's intentions. Irene's mother and uncle believed that Ferd was only interested in Irene's wealth and did not support their relationship. Irene's older children from a previous marriage could not accept Ferd, but the youngest child, who had been raised by Ferd since he was 2 years old, considered him a real father. In early 2011, Ferd wanted to return to Colombia to visit his homeland because his father was seriously ill. Ferd's father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and his sister had informed him of his health condition. Irene also wanted to visit Colombia and decided to go with her husband. She wanted to meet Faird's father for the first time and experience the famous Baronia Festival, an event that usually takes place at the end of February. For Irene, the trip was also a much-needed break after years of hard work and raising 5 children without a break. Irene and Faird had planned a 10-day trip, and her mother and sister had agreed to take care of the children during their absence. Although Irene's mother had concerns about the trip, she did not take them seriously. However, at the time, Irene's family was in financial trouble due to an unfortunate business. The situation became worse when Irene discovered that the €3,000 in personal savings she had kept at home had disappeared the night before they left. This almost caused their plans to be cancelled. But Irene quickly found a solution and borrowed money from her uncle and some close friends. She then booked plane tickets in a hotel in the city center, ensuring that they were ready for the trip. Irene and Faird arrived in Colombia on February 27, 2011. Upon arrival, they checked into a hotel and Irene called home to inform her mother that the flight had gone smoothly. 2 days later, Faird broke the bad news of Irene's death to her 14-year-old eldest son, initially claiming it was an accident. However, the truth was soon revealed. Irene had been murdered during a robbery at an entertainment venue in Baronia. The case attracted widespread media attention in Colombia. Initially, the story revolved around Irene, a Spanish tourist who was murdered by robbers and fled the scene, leading to a massive police manhunt across the city. But the circumstances of the robbery and murder were unusual. The attackers did not appear to have been interested in stealing valuables, instead shooting Irene in the heart before fleeing the scene. Upon arriving at the scene, Faird's calm demeanor during interviews with police and media representatives raised suspicions. Authorities confirmed Irene's murder and said that her remains would be repatriated once the investigation was complete. As investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the scene, the mystery of Irene Cortez's death began to unravel. The footage was important because it captured Irene and Faird Garris meeting Faird's brother, sister, and wife on March 1st. That evening, the group spent time attending a festival, walking around town, and then going to a local bar for dinner at Faird's suggestion. As the time passed 1 a.m. and the bar emptied, Irene's group were the only customers left, along with the bar staff. However, things took a turn for the worse around 2 a.m. when 2 men who seemed uncomfortable walked into the restaurant. What worried the manager was that the 2 men did not order any food or drinks, and their behavior was very suspicious. Furthermore, their youthful appearance prompted the manager to check whether they were of legal age. The young men refused to show identification when asked to leave. One of them pulled out a gun and pointed it at the manager. His accomplice pulled out a knife but quickly moved out of view of the camera. The gunman pushed the manager aside, approached Irene's table and announced his intention to rob her, demanding her cell phone and cash. The accomplice with the knife reappeared, presumably to collect valuables, while the gunman threatened the group. The gunman ordered Faird to stand up so he could search her pockets. As Irene attempted to grab her purse, the attacker shoved her with his gun. A shot was fired as he grabbed the purse, hitting Irene in the chest. She fell to the floor, and the attackers fled without taking anything. Faced with a dangerous situation, Faird and his brother chased the attackers while his sister tried to treat Irene's wounds. At that time, the brother's wife called for help, but the attackers escaped too quickly to catch up. The emergency services arrived quickly, but Irene died of her injuries on the way to the hospital. After the robbery and murder at the bar, which left Irene dead, law enforcement agencies mobilized all possible resources. Since the city was in the midst of a crowded holiday season, ensuring their safety was of utmost importance. A large reward was announced, 10 million pesos, equivalent to €3,500, for information leading to the perpetrator. Shortly after, a suspect named Brian Dario was arrested. He later gave the name of his accomplice, Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos, 18, voluntarily surrendered in the hope of a lighter sentence. During Brian's interrogation, he claimed that his financial situation, debts, and the need to care for his sick child with high medical costs led him to commit the crime. These statements were later confirmed by his relatives. Brian also claimed that the shooting of Irene was an accident while he was trying to snatch her handbag. Juan Carlos also claimed that he was involved in the crime unintentionally. He said that Brian did not reveal his detailed plan but asked for help in his work. Juan claimed that he only carried a small knife to threaten, not to cause injury, and left the scene when he realized Brian's true intentions. However, surveillance camera footage contradicts Juan's statement, showing that he returned to Brian. With both suspects arrested and confessing to the crime, the case seemed to be solved and prison sentences awaited them. The court found Brian guilty of robbery and murder with aggravating circumstances and sentenced him to 23 years in prison. Meanwhile, Juan received a 17-year sentence for his role as Brian's accomplice. From the beginning of the investigation, Irene's family accused Faird of orchestrating the murder of his wife. Irene's mother and uncle hired a private investigator to conduct an independent investigation, gathering additional evidence and files to hold Faird responsible and prove his involvement in the case. According to Maria Lucas, Faird was the only person who knew about the €3,000 hidden in Irene's house, and he was also the only one who could have secretly accessed the money. Another important detail is that Faird used his father's illness as the main reason to go to Colombia. However, in reality, Faird's father was not diagnosed with cancer and he is still healthy for his age. Juan was clearly scared and likely didn't understand what was happening as Brian approached and went up to Faird and lifted him without directly threatening him with a gun. It seemed like the men knew each other and were acting together. Then, Faird oddly moved behind Irene, who was sitting at the table, when she reached into her bag for her wallet. The man with the gun looked at another man as if waiting for a signal. It's unclear if he received any sign, as Irene and Faird had their backs to the camera. After the shot, Faird chased the killer but, according to experts, he deliberately let him escape. However, this claim is controversial because Brian was armed, and Faird might have feared for his life. Faird's behavior after Irene was declared dead was also questionable. He willingly gave interviews to reporters, discussed the details of the incident, and didn't appear too upset or depressed. Another important question is why, after the tragedy, Faird called Irene's 14-year-old son instead of her mother, uncle, or any adult relatives to inform him of her death. Pedro Lucas, Irene's uncle, broke the silence by giving a press interview in which he openly expressed his suspicions and investigation findings. He firmly believed that Faird had meticulously planned the trip to trap Irene. According to Pedro, Faird used the stolen money to hire a killer and had plans to acquire guardianship of the children and take control of the business after Irene's death. Faird's mother vehemently defended her son against the accusations. She claimed that Faird truly loved Irene and the children and would never harm them. However, while defending Faird, she inadvertently revealed that he had a tendency to take offense when his pride was hurt, particularly when it came to Irene's loyalty. Furthermore, a disturbing revelation emerged that Faird had left Spain using forged documents, as he was not permitted to travel due to his recent parole release from prison. In response, Faird denied the claim, stating that he departed the country legally, with Irene acting as his guarantor. Irene's body was finally returned to her native Spain 12 days after the tragedy. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the coffin had to remain closed throughout the ceremony. Hundreds of mourners attended, including family, friends, neighbors, and even strangers who were moved by Irene's story. However, one person who was absent was none other than Faird. Faird chose not to return to Spain for the funeral, fearing retaliation from Irene's relatives. He claimed that they had repeatedly threatened him and his elderly mother, and so he decided to delay his return. Before attempting to return, Ferd sought a protection order from the authorities, but his request was denied. Feeling unprotected, he decided not to risk attending the funeral. Instead, Ferd took his concerns to court, filing a complaint against Irene's relatives, Maria and Pedro Lucas, alleging that they were preventing him from returning home. However, the couple denied Ferd's complaint, claiming that they actually wanted him to return to Spain to stand trial. Further investigations and trials were conducted with new details and charges against Ferd. Brian and Juan, who were serving time in a Colombian prison, were questioned about their relationship with Ferd and the possibility of a premeditated plot. However, Brian completely denied this theory. He maintained that the murder was simply the unintended consequence of a robbery gone wrong. Brian claimed that he had never met Ferd before and denied being hired as a hitman to kill Irene. The allegations seemed to lack any basis, with no clear evidence of premeditation or contract killing. There were only assumptions and interpretations of events from the recording. Brian admitted that he had consumed alcohol and drugs that night, so he did not remember the events clearly. Juan insisted that his friend had nothing to do with Ferd's plan and that everyone was shocked by what happened in the bar. Juan appears to be telling the truth, but the testimony of Brian, who fired the fatal shot, raises doubts. Although he did not commit the robbery, Brian's sick child is receiving expensive treatment in hospital. Brian claims that someone kind helped, but the lawyer claims that the €3,000 stolen from Irene were used for treatment. There are rumors that Brian accepted prison to save his child and secretly transferred the money to his wife, but this has not been proven. Ferd only returned to Spain after a court order to ensure his safety. Months passed and media attention waned. When he returned, Ferd claimed to have evidence proving his innocence in the murder of his wife. The main reason for his return was to take care of the children he had with Irene, who had been cared for by Irene's relatives during his absence. 6 months later, Ferd revealed in a major interview that his life had changed completely. He lost his job, had his passport confiscated, and was unable to leave the country. Worse still, his friends turned their backs on him. His late wife's mother and uncle prevented Ferd from seeing his children. Ferd repeatedly confronted Maria and Pedro Lucas in court. He accused them of threatening him, while they tried to prove that Ferd was involved in Irene's death. However, neither side could provide convincing evidence. As a result, Ferd's children remained in the care of his grandmother and uncle. Ferd was also unable to reclaim any of his late wife's assets.